I'm not saying anything to you in particular because I know you're not too accurate with your reporting.
That's what you paid
so you're
for.
Saying I should resign. So you're saying I should resign.
I think
that's
you should,
your opinion. Is that right?
That's my
opinion.
Fine. Are you going to resign then?
No, of course I'm not going to resign.
I simplify things next time.
Hello, one and all. Welcome to TNC Does 2023. It is the two fine gentlemen that took you through our Christmas special, back once again to take it through. Well, it's not a special, but it's still a little 2023 New Year's celebrations. Teo Pellizzeri with me. My name is Joey Lynch, back for another year of just wonderful Australian football, really. Doesn't Australian football just always make you feel wonderful? Why wouldn't you come back? But Teo, you've just gotten back after commentating on the A-League women's action, Melbourne City versus Western Sydney Wanderers. Bit of a boil over there. We'll get to that in a little bit. But how are you doing, mate?
You say that, but I think the real story is we have been here in this chat ever since the Christmas episode edition finished in a 2-week post-show chat, which has stretched us all the way through until we went live here tonight.
Oh, man, if we ever start a Patreon or something like that, or an OnlyFans, I don't know, whatever the kids are on these days, we'll stick up the post-show chats like behind $1,000 paywall, because that is where the real gold is.
Yeah, sure. Only in a day where screen recording and audio downloading and all of those things no longer exist. But yes, top of the evening to you, Joey, and looking forward to getting stuck into all the A-Liga Hombres chat. And I believe we have a roll call of special guests who will be coming on through the course of the show.
Indeed, we are going to be joined momentarily by Nick Stoll, who is currently making himself dinner for he and his partner, no doubt. Well, I did try to convince him to come on while he was cooking dinner. We are, of course, a cooking podcast, even more than an Australian football one, but unfortunately, he couldn't come on for that one. We should have other friends. Nick Nabano should be jumping on at some point later in the show. Lockie Flanagan said that he's Alessandro Diamanti to come on. He's 50-50 about whether or not that he comes on, and we might have a few more other guests popping in along the way. Basically, heck, if you've been on this show before, DM us and we'll see what we can do. That's basically what it is. But we've got a huge show today. A lot has happened in Australian football since we were last together. We last dropped an episode on Christmas Eve. And, well, Melbourne Victory stuff, it was the talk of the town then. It's the talk of the town now. For some of the same reasons, some of the different reasons. We'll get to that. The grand final decision, well, it sort of feels like it's gone away a little bit, but it's still simmering under the surface. We'll talk about that dynamic off the top of the show. And, of course, with every A-Liga Hombres team now playing at least 10 games, we're going to go through the entire competition, and we're going to have a chat about where they're at and what they might need to do to improve. And then at the ends, we'll have a Liga Feminina chat, the dub chat. Very exciting and interesting couple of days in that. And, of course, the A-Liga belt. So, huge show. But we might lead off the top with discussions about the issue that has basically dominated Australian football's discourse since it was announced, the AEPL's decision to sell the grand finals to New South Wales. We've entered, Teo, we're both very online people, so maybe we're in a better position to hear the news and all that sort of stuff. But even despite that, it feels like we've sort of reached a simmering point in the debate surrounding the grand finals. I'm not sure whether you're about to disagree with me or something's gone wrong with your
No,
feed.
I know we're a cooking show, but I would say simmering was weeks ago. I think it's cooled right off. I would say it's not simmering anymore.
Well, that is the general sentiment I'm going for. I mean, there's still anger there, people posting about their frustrations. There was an announcement a few days ago that A-League's active fan groups, 11 of them, OSM, still not in the tent. They've been kicked out of the tent. Everybody's having a go at them. But they'll be meeting with the APL in the coming days. So we'll get to that. But you are right, Teo. I think the biggest reflection for me since we last did a show is it just seems to have sort of faded away. And we talked about how that was probably going to be the case, given the violent pitch invasion and how that sort of sucked the wind out of the entire discourse, but I think what really rammed it home to me was some images went up on Twitter last night. Some reporters, not last night. Was it last night? No, it was a couple of nights ago. Or was it? I've lost track of time. At the Perth Glory game, some fans unveiled some banners in protest of the APL. They were quickly confiscated by security. And if that had happened in the day or two after the grand final announcement, it would have been huge. Brush fire, massive controversy, likes and retweets for all up the wazoo. And it just sort of took place the other night with nary a whisper. It barely seemed to crack the discourse.
That is, I think, where you are too online, though, Joey, because A-League security guards or security guards at sporting events not knowing the context of the sporting contest, which is going on in front of them, is nothing new. I mean,
I'm not so much saying that it was. I'm not saying it was.
Is there any evidence it was confiscated because the security guards themselves understood the context of the grand final debate?
I'm not saying that it was a surprise that they were confiscated. What I was reflecting on was the lack of a reaction to that, because when has online reaction ever demanded context? If this had happened after the announcement, regardless of whether the security guards knew what they were doing or not, it would have been a massive firestorm. It would have been the latest kosh to hammer the APL with. And I didn't see that this time, which I think is reflective of the momentum.
But again, I want to take it back a step. I mean, it wasn't the issues of previous years that, Michelle Morris can get kicked out of a Sydney FC women's game for, beating a tambourine. I mean, you can put up a banner that has no profanity in it, and it gets confiscated by security guards because security guard sees, security guard acts. And I mean, I'm almost at the point where I actually think there should be some sort of cost-benefit analysis done of whether or not the A-Leagues can run their own security company nationally that actually has inducted, educated security guards that know the fan bases that they're working with. I know that there are supporter marshals that didn't do much to help the situation at Victory. There were lots of marshals trying to stop them, a lot, and they weren't able to stop them getting on the field, right? So I'm not saying marshals, I'm saying the actual security guards appointed by the venues. But I mean, we're going around in circles with this conversation. How many times have we had it? Whether it's a violent pitch invasion or whether it's a tambourine at an A-League women's game, we're back here talking about security guards picking low-hanging fruit, picking on people they know that they can provide, stand over to. But then when there's something serious going, they don't get paid enough. They're freelance, probably work-a-day casuals that are on the minimum wage that aren't going to put themselves in the road of what Lawrence Thomas and Alex King did. So you're right. The reaction wasn't there. I think one factor, Joey, is that we've had good home crowds and good performances from home teams. Perth, Central Coast, Adelaide. Not the case across the league, of course, but I feel as though it's dissipated somewhat because particularly with regards to Adelaide and Perth, their most recent home game, let's put Adelaide's awful performance against Central Coast aside, their most recent home game has been a great home experience for the fans that went and has got people feeling good about the experience of going to A-League football. Is that acceptance? I'm inclined to say that in some of the markets who would have the most, I think, to feel aggrieved about, Melbourne, in theory, it's only a, 1 hour flight or a 1 day drive. Adelaide and Perth, I think, would have far more case to feel aggrieved about it. And they've actually had some good turnouts and some great atmospheres at their games since.
Well, I think that's one of the things we talked about, how difficult it was going to be to maintain the rage of these protests, especially.
Because there's no centralized leader. There are lots of people who want to self-appoint themselves as leaders of fan groups, whether it's at an individual club or whether it's a spokesperson for every fan in the country. If you can put them on the front page of the paper, it doesn't make you the spokesperson for fans in Australia if you're self-appointed. But they don't have someone who's organically risen to the top, like, say, a union leader or someone who's been elected. I mean, the statement. I mean, do we want to talk about the statement?
We do have the statement, so I'll bring it up on the screen now.
You are currently, and I have at times been full-time wordsmiths. I found this to be a curious statement. I did, especially the last sentence. It was very Daniel Bagala, I thought.
Yeah, I reflected when I was reading it, and for the benefit of the podcast listeners, we'll read it out. We can support a statement from 11 active supporter groups. OSM still no bueno in this, but We can confirm that the APL has agreed to meet representatives of the active supporter groups collectively in the coming week. We will be seeking answers regarding the rationale behind and potential to reverse the decision to sell the next 3 grand finals to Destination New South Wales. We are also aiming to implement safeguards so such decisions in the future could not be made without proper fan consultation. Our objective will be to ensure that the APL agrees to establish a collective supporters committee that has a voice on matters concerning one of the game's key stakeholders and restructure appropriately at board level within a reasonable time frame. We will update supporters after the meeting has concluded, which will guide any action that follows. Rest assured, the APL will be held accountable for its decisions surrounding the governance of our game. So it ended on a flourish, didn't it?
But I don't know. Again, who's the spokesperson? How can one body bring all 11 together to the table? I don't envy the people who have to convene that meeting. I don't envy the people who want to go to that meeting in good faith, because everyone's going to come with their list of grievances. And, after the Sydney Wellington game, are we sure that it's not just going to turn into a debate about VAR? Like, quite genuinely. Are we sure they're going to stay on message collectively across that many stakeholders? This is why running big organizations is bloody difficult, Joey. Good luck to them. I also wonder, I have been a big fan and a big advocate for active support. And I think it is absolutely necessary to the colour and spectacle of the league. Just go through this podcast if you don't believe me, right? I talk about it all the time. And one of my big bugbears that I used to, on TNCs that I wasn't on, I used to complain to you guys in the chat all the time about how you didn't talk enough about security issue X, policing issue Y, fan issue Z. It actually is one of the things that I hammer as a non-active supporter, because I do enjoy it, but I just don't envy the task that they've got here. The deal's done. Acceptance is coming for more and more people. And I'm not sure, it's saber rattling, and by all means rattle them, but I just wonder, if they have any means to an end here, other than to say that, they vented their spleen, they aired their grievances, and they had their 2 cents.
Yeah, it was striking reading through that, and one of the things you just talked about then, Tayo, was the messaging that it's surrounding this entire thing and how you can maintain that messaging. I mean, my reading of that statement was that whilst sort of the goals were the same, the messaging, there was even a shift in the messaging between their first 3 or 4 page statement and that 1 page statement. This one, well, as I said, it was the previous statement felt a lot more reaching across the aisle and presenting themselves as equal partners and, professionalism and all of that sort of stuff. This one felt a lot more confrontational. Especially that last line might be clouding my perspective of it. But yeah, that was one thing that I noticed, that there seems to be, I'm not sure whether that's the results of, well, as we said, there's no spokesperson. We know this is a collective of the active supporter groups, but, we don't know if this is just like one active supporter from each group. There's 11 of them in a group chat, or if there's a big Discord somewhere with a bunch of them. We don't know the process of how these statements are being written and made.
I mean, in terms of I thought the statement sounded juvenile. It sounds like it was written by a uni student. Maybe it was, but I think there's also no data. There's no numbers behind it. Like, the active support haven't expressed what percentage of each team's populace they represent. The Newcastle walkout, for example, in a 5,000 crowd, so a below average crowd on what Newcastle have been drawing that season. The Newcastle walkout, that very first one, the first game that was played the day before the Melbourne Derby, was about 50 people. So 50 out of 5,000 is, yes, it's a disproportionate amount of noise that they make, and it adds to the atmosphere, but it's not a, overwhelming percentage of the actual fans in the stadium. And we just don't know. As you say, it could be one representative answering an email or a DM on behalf of hundreds of people. It could be, convened and talked about in a Discord by, almost everyone. We don't know. They haven't lifted the curtain on it. And I think that air of mystery makes it, it's almost useless speculating about it, because, Joey, genuinely, do you think there'll be any give out of any meeting? Because I don't.
I think
Specifically on the grand final. There might be give on other things.
Oh, there won't be. There won't be give on the grand final.
Exactly.
I think that's why I thought
there might be give on things like security, policing, protocols, whatever. But there won't be give on the grand final.
There won't be give on the grand final, and that's why, in fact, I thought the previous statement was such a good step in the right direction for them, because it was laying that groundwork to move beyond the grand final and establish more transparency and reform. And there was specific ideas surrounding what that reform would look like, and ideas, but and probably just because it was a longer statement. But and there, you've touched on another, not problem, I guess, as a conundrum for these groups to face, in the fact that at some point, if you're going to speak for the fans, it can't just be the active supporter groups representing this. You need to bring in the other thousands of people, the much less online people, and all these different demographics as well. Because when you look at active support, what is it? It's disproportionately young and male. So like between 16 and 30 years old, young men, or with 16 and 30-year-old young women. Of course, that's not all of them. If you don't fit that demographic in your active support, yes, you exist. I know that. But as a broader demographical trend, that's the case. How do you bring in all of these non-active supporter groups and get their voices heard? A, how do you get their voices heard on this? And B, just how do you use their voices to raise these issues, to raise the level surrounding these issues, so that it's not just 50 active supporters from Terrace Nova Castria, it's 4,000 of the other fans that were in McDonald Jones Stadium that day. And how do you quantify those numbers when you go into the APL? Because you're absolutely right, Teo. One of these things that you really do need when you're speaking to suits, you need numbers. You need data.
Evidence. To be honest. I mean, I've said everything that I have left to say on this topic, because I don't think there'll be give on the grand final. I think it's, rightly or wrongly, happening in Sydney for the next 3 years. And really, the focus has to be on how are you building this event. Notice how there's been no communication about what that week will entail since this blew up. But really, that's the only way it can be salvaged. How does this become the Formula One Grand Prix weekend, the Australian Open tennis of the A-League? Sydney doesn't have an F1 Grand Prix. Sydney doesn't have the Australian Open tennis.
Oh,
Sydney's got this. The New South Wales government is a joint partner in this. They have just as much of an obligation to make this work as the APL do. Because, assuming there's an All-Stars game attached to it, this is going to be an international event. The grand final is going to be part of it.
I think the reason we haven't heard about that yet is because, as we've been talking about, the rage is petering out. If all of a sudden the APL starts coming out and talking about how great grand final week's going to be, they risk sparking that to life again. I imagine, this is a case of deliberately keeping your heads down.
Yeah, true. But at some point or another, you got to start selling tickets.
You got to, but I imagine the decision has been made that right now isn't the best time to do this. I think the other thing what I think they can be doing now, and I think really needs to be the focus of supporter groups moving forward, is because, as I've said on this podcast before, didn't like the grand final decision, didn't think it was the right one, think it alienated supporter groups when they are precious at this point. They are precious resources, fans. But now that that's done, what I think the fans really need to focus on is pressuring to get that elevated voice at an APL level. I don't think we're going to see fan representatives on the board. I don't think that's ever going to happen. But at the very least, get an advisory group that has some transparency around it as well. Start coming up with proposals about we want to have an advisory group, and here is how us fans are going to elect people to that advisory group. So it's transparent and it's an active representation of supporter groups. Come out with concrete plans surrounding things like that, and really ramp up the pressure surrounding aspects of governance. Like A-League women's supporter groups aren't present on this statement again. We know that they contributed to the last one. But
to be fair, Joey, A-League women's supporter groups, we're talking like 3 people out of crowds of 300 or 400. So an even smaller representative of the actual fans at games. Like, you can 2 or 3 friends can call themselves a active support group, and that's great. But it's
That is an elephant in the room. That is an elephant in the room.
Give me numbers here. Give me numbers,
But their point surrounding gender diversity on the APL board is a fair one. It's one of these established principles, these 50-50 principles, or approaching it in governance. It's widely considered good governance at this point, that even if you don't have an actual target surrounding gender diversity on your board, you try to target it anyway, because if you've just got a bunch of middle-aged to olds, mostly white men surrounding a board table, you're leaving out so much lived experiences and potential wisdom. So that's something they could be pressuring on as well. But yes, I agree with you that the grand final decision was 99% irreversible when it was announced, and then it went to 99.99 when the pitch invasion happened, I reckon. So,
and is that a segue into our next big ticket item off the top, Joey?
It can be indeed, because we are going to go through every single A-Liga men's team and report on how they're doing. But really, we have to say down with the alphabetical order to start with, and go to Melbourne Victory, because they are the biggest story in the A-Liga men's at the moment. All this talk about how they were going to be dominating and invincible at the start of the season with their new additions. Well, that's not the way that it's turning out for them. They suffered their third defeat on the bounce to Brisbane Roar over the weekend. They now sit second bottom of the A-League men, equal on points with bottom placed Perth Glory, only propped up by their superior goal difference. The news has come through this morning that marquee man Luis Nani has ruptured his ACL and is going to be out for the season. There has been reports, a report in The Age diving into their financial accounts and also their reporting at their AGM surrounding the details of 777 Partners takeover, which we'll get to in a second. So it's really happening with the biggest club in the A-Leagues in terms of supporter base. But before we get to that, we have a massive addition coming to the podcast. They've been sitting there in the waiting area, waiting to come in. They've just finished their dinner, no doubt. So I will welcome them in now. Joining us is Soot, who's just walked in after finishing her dinner. The newest addition to the Lynch household. She jumped up onto my lap. So say hello to Soot, everybody. And I guess at the same time, Nick Stoll's here too.
Buenos noches, mis amigos. ¿Cómo estás? Look, great to be here. I heard the podcast while I was cooking and eating. Some very good points made. I think the A-League, look, we're going to get into everything, but just to tie a little bow on everything that's kind of been said, got a big deficit of fun in the A-League right now. You know, that's like true. It's just not that fun. Like at the start of the season, there was a lot of fun, going on, whether it was like, the City Derby and Ninkovic and Victory when they started the season. There was some fun involved there. It was fun with Garang Kuol and Cummings and the Mariners. There was some fun storylines or some fun things happening, whether it was A-League All Access and the memes that were coming out of that, whether it was A-League Fantasy and the stuff coming out of that.
Hey, I'm still having fun in A-League Fantasy.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe if I'd committed long enough. I do want to, but I do think like just kind of, I spent a lot of kind of this Christmas break dabbling in the other sports, seeing what's going on, trying to work out what, we can take from them. And, I was thinking like, what makes darts fun? And obviously the atmosphere is like,
it was 180.
Yeah, but one of the actual thing is like the characters are quite fun because they look like you kind of middle-aged. They look like the antithesis of athletes.
Stoll, it sounds to me like you need to go and acquaint yourself with State League 5 in Melbourne because if you want darts physique, that's what you're looking at.
Well, but so one thing that I think is really kind of interesting is like I remember reading this article about and look, we'll get onto this. This is probably boring people already, but when people in darts, when you watch it, right, and they throw and they've like the final dart, to win the round or whatever, to complete the thing, is like they've got to get, a double 19 or something. And the camera zooms in really dramatically, right? that Zoom is so smart because when you're sitting there, you suddenly are watching going, oh my God, double 19, it's huge. The Zoom is part of it, right? And then they miss or they get it, and it's very, very exciting. Alan Riley in the comments is a darts podcast. Look, it's a food podcast. It's a darts podcast. It is the most tactically diverse podcast going around. All right, we can put in a topic in the comments, and we'll give you 2 minutes on it. But the point is that I feel like everyone in the A-League, you know, we talk about the A-Liga belt. Like, that was actually the reason we did that is just to introduce a little bit more fun in the league, in the games. Now, you need to be careful as an official league doing gimmicky stuff, but broadcasters, media in general, us, fans, players, media managers, coaches, whatever, need to look at increasing the amount of fun around this league. And I don't have any, like, amazing solutions. You can't just, you know, get a bunch of 50-year-olds drink a lot and a Zoom is gonna be, I'm not saying that is, you know, we can't just exactly put that on the A-League, but I do think we need to increase the level of fun in the league right now, specifically right now.
Well, I will get back to the topic. So who's not having fun? Melbourne Victory fans not having fun. The ones that can't get into the stadium perhaps having more fun than the ones that can, because at least they could have changed the channel and done something else rather than stay for the full 90 minutes against Brisbane Roar. Stoll, Teo, I'll throw this to whoever wants to go first. Just Victory was supposed to have had their darkest day a couple of years ago when they finished bottom. Do you think we're heading back to a new darkest day, or is this not as bad and we're just being fatalistic?
I mean, before we even get into Victory, just on the game itself, can you imagine if after the Saudi and Japan games, they'd pulled the trigger on Arnie and Tony Popovich was now the Socceroos coach? I mean, what a sliding doors moment. I mean, just incredible to think. Is this their darkest day? I don't necessarily think it is, if only because I think this is pushing Victory closer to the identity of who they want to be. I suggested to you on New Year's Eve that the majority of Victory fans have tunnel vision for just the senior men's A-League team, don't really care about anything else that goes on within the club. If the senior A-League men's team is playing this badly, if their sugar hit marquee is essentially a misfire, if their big-name coach, who is supposed to be their next title-winning manager, is on the nose with the fan base and drawing the ire of every commenter on social media at every halftime and full-time results post, then all the resources and all the attention go back to the senior men's team. And I'm not necessarily sure that's a bad thing for Victory, because it gets them closer to the identity of what so many of the fans of this club want them to be, which is tunnel vision for just the A-League men's.
Well, Stolt, looking at Victory right now, do you well, because you've been in this industry for quite a while, so I imagine you've seen the finances.
What do you mean? I'm a young whippersnapper. I'm on the come up.
Look how young and hungry he is, Joey. Look how young and hungry he is.
To be fair, this is actually Australian football, so I mean, if we were going to extrapolate media terms from the football, I guess 40-year-olds are still young in Australian football media terms.
Hey, that means I've got years up my sleeve, Joey. I love that.
Well, I mean, if a 24-year-old's a young player in Australian football, it bears going that a 40-year-old's young for Australian football media. But stop. You've been in this industry. You've seen the off-field noise surrounding Melbourne Victory, the potential financial peril that they're in. Did any of that surprise you, knowing what you know about how the industry as a whole has been hit by COVID?
This is like when, you know, your mate who like kind of lives a bit of a fucked up life, and then eventually you go over to their place and you're like, this is how you're living? Like, you're not surprised, but you are a little bit like, guys, you could have got your shit together a little bit more, you know? That's kind of what I feel like with Victory and with a lot of A-League clubs when you see their finances. Not surprised, but still disappointed when you see it in the cold light of day. Look, the problem with Victory is like, this actually was meant to be a season on the up. You know, 2 seasons ago, it was hard to look. The Jim Magilton season was one of the all-time worst for the Victories, but the the Kurt season as well. That was absolutely stupid. They've had a couple, right? They've had a couple of absolute horror seasons, right? When Rudy Gestede was playing up front, I thought that was like, and then when they were getting beat, what'd they lose? 6-0 or something in the first derby against City, and then there was the second one, 7-0. Like there's never been a bigger humiliation than when the opposition fans held up 6 and then you lost by 7 in that game. Like that's just, I've never seen that, right? All the leagues, all my experience, right? That still kind of makes me laugh. But with the greatest respect to Victory fans, sorry. But now, I tipped them to be top this season. I thought that would be good. I thought, Popper,
unbeaten as well, Stoll, or just top?
I don't think I say some dumb things. I don't go that far. But, Nani, that hasn't worked out. I mean, even before he got injured, that's real sad for him. I don't know if that's the end of his career. Had a chance to meet him, real nice guy. A really good talent who I thought was going to be much better in this league. And I'd love to kind of hear from him why he hasn't gone well, because it kind of is inexplicable a little bit. But, this has been real bad. And, now Victory kind of, I used to hold them up as like, this is the biggest team in the comp. This is kind of maybe not how all teams should be run, but at least, you held them up as a good example of the A-League. Now you look at it, and Taylor, like you make the point, this team is not working well at other levels. Other than, it struggled at other levels, but the senior team is always kind of usually, apart from those seasons we just mentioned, usually the senior team is stepping up. To be where they are now, in debt, fan issues, no sponsors are going to want to touch them with a 10-foot pole at the moment. Like, who's sponsoring the Victory? Maybe this podcast could sponsor the Victory next season, because I feel like that's going at a cut price thing. The fans, they're not having a great time. I feel like they're bailing. I feel like a lot of people are bailing on Victory.
But isn't that also, I mean, when Nani signed, I remember saying on this very podcast that the first Victory home game will hook a bunch of people in to go and watch them once, and then the football is what won't bring them back. And I mean, I know on the New Year's Eve podcast, I said so many of the issues the game is facing can be solved by just sending the fans home happy with the product they've seen on the pitch for 90 minutes. I mean, wasn't grinning and bearing it through the Popper experience and wins at the expense of performance or entertainment something that just quite simply not enough Melbourne Victory fans have made peace with, and now the results aren't there either?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I wonder about Popper as well, because like you say, he was kind of the red hot favorite to take over Arnie 9 months ago, whenever those kind of discussions were happening. So I do wonder, his stock is kind of starting to fall, I think, quite rapidly. And he was kind of in a tier of, obviously, he won the Asian Champions League. He was in a tier of A-League managers, at least in public perception.
Well,
and I think he's now
the semi-final.
That
semi-final defeat hurts too, because had Victory at least won the championship, this could be put down as a championship hangover. This season's a mulligan. But losing that semi-final, Joey profoundly said, this is the first time Western have beaten Victory, and it hurt. And boy, is it still hurting months and months later.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I guess the big question is, and look, we're saying how we're going to rate him out of 10. I give him a 2 out of 10. I think it's been an absolute disaster of a season. I don't even know what I'm necessarily giving him the 2 for. Maybe, I don't know. They had some good crowds for a while early on. Good crowd numbers, I should say. But where are they going to be next season? Because there's going to be less money. They're probably, Popper either has to do a clear out, rethink the way he is coaching, or there has to be a clear out of Popper. Well, so where are they next season?
It's looking at Victory now, and it sort of does speak to the challenges that confront them is that there are significant challenge in both an on and off field capacity. It's not sort of like before the Mariners sorted out their new ownership. So when they were still, when they under Stajic, when they were still, without an owner and there was an existential threat over them because of the finances, at least you could point at the pitch and say, well, at least they're having fun. Alua Kuol's really fun. The football's, pretty good. Or, opposite for somebody like, I guess, Sydney FC or something. Well, the football's bad, but the club will be fine moving forward. They're not under, they're not about to, nothing's going to go wrong on that front. For Victory, it's both. Things off the field are obviously not going, it's not ideal what's happening off the field. I'm not as fatalistic as a lot of us. I think most teams in the league are in some sort of, debt. I think it was it's even in the Western United documentary trailer. CEO Chris Pellavanis is talking about like they're 5.5 or something in the hole, around that number. Victory 7.1, but then you bear in mind that Victory also have to fund for that reporting year. Victory had to fund the full A-League women's program, elite women's developmental program, a lot more junior developmental sides, and some of that reporting period would have covered the Afghan women's national team as well. So I don't think they're spending egregiously more on their football departments than others. Yes, COVID has absolutely battered their revenues. And the threat that comes now is that these crowd troubles, as you said, Stoll, getting sponsors in the door, potential crowd restrictions, potential fines from Football Australia. We should be finding out about what should be the final round of sanctions early to mid next week. Question from Geraldo in the comments: does Amy cost a fortune for them to play at? I don't think it does. I think because they're the longest tenured side in that stadium, their headquarters are there, they actually have a quite favourable rental agreement there. I don't think for Victory, I think the crowd that they need to hit to break even is a rather manageable one. Wouldn't be manageable for the other teams in Melbourne, but ostensibly it should be manageable for Melbourne Victory. To be honest, what I think comes out of all this is that if Victory do end up in the hole, I think what happens is 777 Partners become the majority owner of that club sooner. I think it was inevitable the 777 Partners were going to become full owners of that club at some point. The second Anthony DiPietro said at their announcement press conference that there's a pathway to full ownership, just it went in my mind. They're going to be full owners at some point.
And they're just private equity, right?
They're they're private equity. They've got their own football group. They've got investments in a whole bunch of clubs around the world. And Victory sort of fits what they try to do. They try to go in and they try to buy.
Do they have an energy drink attached to their enterprise, Joey, or not yet?
No, they do not. They have a budget airline. Bonza,
okay.
Which apparently is about to get permission to fly. So probably a good sign if the budget airline on the front of your shirts is actually allowed to fly. So hopefully that goes well for them. But I think that's obviously the worst case scenario is the club folds. I think the most realistic worst case scenario for Melbourne Victory
in that
financially.
Case, 0 out of 10.
I think the most realistic worst case scenario for Melbourne Victory is that 777 Partners take over a lot sooner than anticipated. And then foreign private equity being foreign private equity, who knows what their priorities are for the club, as opposed to right now, it's owned ostensibly by Australians. Well, ostensibly, it's owned by Australians, and you sort of know what you're going to get for them. Although the difference, it's still privately owned. So I don't put as much importance on the nationality of owners as some others do. All right, I'm going to go to on the pitch now. Before we get to me talking about their on the pitch stuff, does anybody have anything else we want to talk about off the pitch with Melbourne Victory?
Do we have an ETA on when the real punishments arrive?
Early to mid next week.
Oh, okay. So we're getting close.
Do we know?
Basically, the deadline is Sunday, and they're not going to wait until Sunday.
Do we know?
Sorry, what'd you say, Sol?
Do we know what they'll be?
We don't know what they'll be. Likely to be some more restrictions on active support at the very least. Likely to be some sort of fines and commitments surrounding fan behaviour in the future. I think the big question, the biggest sore point for Victory might be points deductions.
Well, Joey, based on...
They haven't got many of them.
Yeah. Based on the last statement, how many IQ points am I short of being able to understand the penalties on the first read-through?
I think you might have too many. Teo, you might need to bang your head against a brick wall for a while. But hopefully they'll take a bit more time and make this one really legible. So, but yeah, I'm expecting it early to mid next week. But on the
what it
football,
could be, because I was just going to say, we're trying to increase the fun, and there should be appropriate punishments, but there should be one disappropriate punishment, and that should be the famous Simpsons episode that took place in Australia, the big boot up the arse. Right?
Of who?
I think in this case, Danny Townsend can boot DiPietro up the arse, because I feel like there's some tension there. So, and I like the idea that we'll do it in the gate as well, like the way that kind of Bart did it to the Australian. DiPietro can be at a kind of a victory behind a gate. He'd come out for a little bit. Townsend gets one swing, giant boot, bang. If he misses, that's it. That's it.
They can do it at the January 26th Big Blue.
Hey,
right in the middle of Amy Park.
Wouldn't you come to see it? Wouldn't you be a bit excited that week? Wouldn't that add a little bit of fun? I'm just throwing it out there. There's no bad ideas.
I think for every game that if they have to keep playing games under current arrangements behind closed doors, they actually have to refer to the stadium as Cartman Land in all of the official releases and on the broadcast as well. So it'll be known as Cartman Land until you are allowed to go back in.
Yeah, listen, well, there's obviously a lot to talk about with the off-the-field stuff with Melbourne Victory. For fuck's sake, did a very in-depth discussion on it. They almost went as long as we normally do. That's a good listen if you can have the time. But on the field, the game against Brisbane Roar. I mean, I was talking about banging your head against a brick wall before. No good. It's obvious, we talk about Stolt, you referenced Tony Popovich's stock and about how it's falling at the moment. And I think it's really...
Crypto.
Hey?
It's crypto.
Crypto Popper. Doge Popper. No, but it's because it's quite obvious that Tony Popovich, after the game, came out and took responsibility, said that they haven't been able to find the solutions for their attacking woes, and that it was his responsibility and that he was going to find a way to sort it out. Said that the squad, the players that are there at Melbourne Victory are good enough, but it's on him to figure out how to fix it. But right now, as I think he was sort of admitting in that press conference, he hasn't found the way right now. It's a case wherein he's put Josh Brilliante as a right wing back in a back five against Brisbane Roar. He's playing Rai Marchand and Jake Brimmer as more deeper lying midfielders. And then he's playing in front of them a front three of Falami, D'Agostino and Nani. And once again, it just didn't work. You look at some of the stats related to this Melbourne Victory side, and, it's really... it's noticeable that they're actually middle of the pack when it comes to actual XG, which is it's a pretty good trend indicator. It's not the be all and end all, but it's a pretty good trend indicator. But you look at their shot conversion rate; it's the lowest in the league. They're converting 4.6% of their shots on goal. They're one of the least. They're one of the least accurate sides in the competition. They're just not creating chances in the final third that are good goal scoring opportunities. They have lots of shots that are blocked. They have shots from outside the box, but there's a real dearth of just chances where you can just outright say, oh, the attackers butchered that shot. And that speaks to that it's not just problems in the attack. It's a team-wide issue. As Tony Popovich said before the Brisbane game, it's not just, it's a midfield, it's a defensive issue as well. It's a chain, and the entire thing's not working very well right now, I don't think. Defensively...
A chain that leads all the way up to the coach.
Well done. But right now, before I go on, I'll talk about their defense, but we do have somebody else waiting to come on. They've been waiting very patiently, ready to come on now. Yes, indeed. Soot's back. and Nick DeBarno's here as well.
Thanks for your introduction, Donnelly. Really appreciate that one, mate. Hello, Soot. Nice to be formally introduced. Hello, everybody. Apologies for the late introduction. Was just finishing work today. Yes, Joey, we get it.
I just got a kitten. Let me have some fun.
No, I know. I've got a cat as well, but I'm not bringing him on stream. But anyways, guys, how are you? Good Sunday.
I'm a professional.
Teo, good
I don't
call today.
stuff around.
Teo, good call today. The Wanderers game. I heard the thanks and success. I was busy, but I heard it, and I was like, this man right here. He's a sly one, but I love it.
Yeah, and what about Victory's defense?
Victory's defense. No, they got big
it's quite
big issues.
Well, statistically, they're in terms of their XG conceded, they're not actually that bad. What they're doing
they're
just
top of the league in terms of the least XG conceded.
Yeah,
really?
They're just giving up stupid goals, which I think talks to the lack of consistency in that defense, players in, players out, and just some boneheaded decisions.
It's tough, right? Because, I mean, clearly their issues with attack because they've conceded 12 goals, which is less than the Central Coast Mariners. Mariners are second. They've conceded 14. So this table, there's about 10 games in. This is why I wanted to do this kind of reset, let's judge everyone. Because this table is just lying. Like, there's teams that are like, you think are good and they're not.
It was a cat stole, not a lion.
But, like, it's a weird table. So you look at it and you think, okay, Victory, what's going on? Can they revive this season? And one thing you've got to say about Popovic is like, there's two parts to being a coach, especially kind of in an A-League coach. One is what you do with the players you have. The other is recruitment. And, I think Popovic, if it hasn't worked out with Nunny, it hasn't worked out with Fornaroli, it hasn't worked out with Juric, he's got to wear some of that because whether he identified them and wanted to bring them in, it's also about how he's implemented them into the squad. Now, D'Agostino seems to have lost form. Falami's had his issues, but there should be enough attacking quality there to create more chances, to have more goals. And I think that's an issue. Devon?
To play devil's advocate here, you can have as many attackers, but if your midfield's not functioning and getting the ball to those players, what are they going to do? For players more like, with D'Agostino's form, Fornaroli, everything else, like I heard in the waiting room, like the fact that, he's playing Brimmer deeper with Marchand as two sort of holding midfielders. But even when they were playing Marchand and Brillante and Brimmer further up, it was always had a ceiling to it. I mean, the Brillante playing almost as an 8 doesn't really, I guess, work to his strengths. So, I mean, they've got big issues. I think what I meant more in terms of their defense was they weren't conceding the type of goals that they were conceding last year. Because as you mentioned, Joey, they have conceded some really just haphazard goals this season, some real lapse marking from set pieces. It's been completely uncharacteristic to what we saw last season where they really were the best defense in the league, but everyone's sort of forgotten that because they didn't win it. Western United did, but for the most part, especially towards the latter stage of the season, they did have the best defense in the league. So yeah, and I think as well the fact like they lost Brendan Hamill, probably didn't replace him. All due respect to George Timotheu, they didn't really bring someone else in who was of the Brendan Hamill quality. Matt Sporanovic, you can't really rely on him on this stage. I think played 2 games just as of now. They've been chopping and changing system. I mean, I don't even think that they really know what their best 11 is right now, or nor do they know what their best system is. And it feels like right now they're just trying to change and see what they can do on the fly and see what sticks. So it does sort of reek like a bit of panic to me. That's what I kind of see with some of the decisions they're making.
But even with the midfield, I was just going to say with the midfield issue, Popovic has identified that he doesn't seem to think that there was a midfield issue based on last season. He hasn't signed any new midfielders or sold any of the ones that they had there last season. He hasn't changed it. Yeah, he might have changed in the way he's implementing it. But my point is, he obviously thought it wasn't an issue pre-season, which is a mark against him as a coach, if he hasn't identified this as a problem.
That's the whole thing about results-based analysis and everything like that. If you're winning, then, what's the issue? That's sort of the way of looking at it.
I mean, results-based analysis is for fans. It's not for a professional coach with a pro license. Like that's where you have to be better.
Yeah,
But then again,
by
though,
the same token, we spent so much of last season, this podcast, saying, "Nah, Jake Brimmer's not a Socceroo," and then having to answer to all those fans who were operating off pure RBA. They got their victory lap at Warren Medal time, and now here we are with, would you say, regression to the mean? I mean,
Well,
if not below the mean, really. And
Below the mean.
is anyone surprised that we're here?
It's a combination of regression to the mean, but also just the fact that, as we've said on this discussion before, like Brimmer is sort of like a luxury player. Like he's gonna look.
No. Your accent does not do that, Joey. You can say luxury. You can say luxury. Surely you can say luxury.
Luxury. Well,
He's a pure luxury, the boy.
French joke.
That's just a quirk from my childhood, like a joke that me and my mother used to have. Like, no, that's not my accent. That's from the luxury, a luxury player. Sorry, luxury player. Like when he's in a team that's going really well, he's gonna look. It's a Birmingham accent, luxury. When he's in a team that's playing really well, he's going to look fantastic. He's going to be pinging balls when everything's working around him. He's
Do
really
you
going
to. Do you know how much grief that caused us last season when we said that and we thought we were stating the obvious?
I don't know, but like, so he's that sort of player. Like, if you put him in a good team, he can put you over the top. But like, it's one of those things. Like in a team like this, and he hasn't, going back to RBA, he hasn't shown us yet that he can do that. And I think Nick Dabano's right. Like, I think the midfield is really an issue trying to figure all this out. Like, we've seen at the start of the season playing Marchand and Brilliante together. It's just not really working. And now we're in a situation wherein we're getting Brilliante at right back. As he sticks, he sticks Brimmer further deeper. We won't be seeing that again, probably, because now he's got to plug a hole left by Nani's disappearance. But I know it's really confusing. And like Nick Dabano was also right in the Timotheu thing. Timotheu was probably a good signing if he's going to be your fourth centre back in the pecking order. So you sort of go in. You can't do it, Stoll. Luxury. So you go into the season with the luxury of having Spira and Miranda as your two first choice centre backs. You know, one of them's going to be injured and on the shelf for certain periods. So you've got a BJ Hamill level player there that can step in. BJ Hamill starts for most other A-League men teams last season, but because he was brought into Victory with a certain role. And then you have George Timotheu below that. So if you've got two absences, maybe there's a suspension and an injury, Timotheu can come in and do spot duty, and maybe he can start, maybe he can play on the right back occasionally, something like that, and do all of these sort of things. But it hasn't worked out like that way, and that is a question surrounding recruitment, I think.
The one
Here's a
thing
question. I was just going to say.
No, Stoles. Hang on.
Yeah,
just
go
hold
on.
one quick thing. Just a very, very quick point. The one thing
we're going to
found
move quicker.
really-
This is annoying me.
No. When I found sort of starting lineup on Friday night, the one thing that I found quite baffling was Will Wilson being dropped. I know I got Angelo come through here and say looks likely. I mean, I thought he was their best player on New Year's Eve against the Mariners, and he wasn't starting.
He's a true A-League youngster at 22 years old, isn't he?
The line from Popper was that physically starting his first ever A-League men game, he pulled up a bit sore. He wasn't used to the physicality yet, so he needed to be managed. That was the official line from Popper.
All right, well, we'll take that on. When you look at that without any context, and for most people, probably don't have the opportunity, whether they don't listen to the press conferences or they just see the lineup 2 hours before the press conference is available to the public. I mean, they would have probably been I think there would have been a few people like, well, that's a little bit odd. I thought he was very good against the Mariners. So I think he's someone that probably should be getting some more minutes as well. So I don't know if maybe there's some more kids that could come through and get some minutes. But I think he's one player that maybe is someone that they should look at, really integrating in this part of the season if they want to try to turn things around.
Very quickly.
Expecting Victory to announce some departures of some youngsters from their academy once the window opens on January 11.
Very quickly, let's rate him out of 10. And also, because mutual termination window is coming, choose one player to mutually terminate.
Come on.
Joey,
I'm not going to advocate for someone to lose their job.
Yeah, I'm not doing
No,
that.
man,
Stop,
this
come
is
on, man.
professional
That's a little-
football.
Can we do
Get
like a player
over
like
it,
it's on?
all right?
Like, come on,
No,
make
Yeah,
it
like
professional.
pick a position, make a target.
So sorry, Joey
First
and
of all-
Debano, when did you guys become Matilda selectors? What's going on here?
Look, and second of all, this is the other thing I'll say. Mutual termination doesn't mean you lose your job. It means you get a new one. All right. It's not like it just ends. Mutual. It's called mutual. You agree because you're going to somewhere else. All right. It's not called one person terminates. You're like, I want a job. Shame on you for being scared. I mutually terminate both of you. Me and Teo run this for the rest of the show.
Oh, kick you off the bloody podcast to keep going.
Teo, help me out here. Rate him out of 10. Go.
3.
Good. That's what I like to hear.
And
Debano.
Nanny.
Yeah, boom. Like it. He's injured.
Wow.
He's not worth it. He's expensive. He takes up a visa spot. That is practical thinking. Go. Debano.
For a rating, 4.
Yep. All right. You want to mutually terminate anyone?
No, targeting a midfielder in January.
Okay. Joey?
3.5.
Okay. Just had to say half for fun.
And targeting a midfielder.
All right. Targeting a midfielder for termination. All right. Sounds like you guys want to get rid of Raymacha.
No, don't put bloody words in our mouth, mate. Like, seriously, Stole? Come on, mate.
Anyway.
Mutual termination with OSM.
Ooh. Going against the fans. Brutal. All right. Let's talk about Adelaide United. The human handbrake, Carl Witt's in charge. I'm going to quickly look up their record and see whether.
Would you say the human handbrake's at the wheel?
Yeah. Yes, I would. And because he's at the wheel, it moves very slowly and stutters a lot.
A lot of this.
Adelaide, 11 games played, 4 wins, 3 draws, 4 losses, 16 goals scored, 17 goals conceded. Really mid-table vibes, obviously. How would you guys kind of, sum up their season so far? Debano, I go to you first.
Very weird, because before the World Cup break, I would have had them as sort of the number 1 contender to Melbourne City. But since the break, they've been very, very inconsistent. I mean, they beat Perth, but not a very good Perth team last week. And then they just got battered against the Mariners. It's impossible to get a read on them. Like probably most teams, it's really hard to get a read on them. I think Ben Halloran's had a really good season, as expected. I think still the same issues that plagued them last season is probably coming more to the forefront this season with Carl Witt going back to the tried and tested Spanish midfield partnership of Isais and One Day. And I think that's definitely on show that, it's not the partnership that needs to be going forward at this stage of their careers. I mean, they've got so many other talented youngsters in their mix, but haven't really gone for that. I haven't really been inspired. Like, as again, a couple months ago was more bullish about them, but now I'm very much in the position of thinking like, things could like go really 2 ways. I think they'll still sneak into finals, but there's a lot of things they need to address. But it's not as if like they don't have the players at their disposal sort of waiting in the wings that could come in and change things a little bit, like a Louis Dorigo potentially starting, more Ethan Alagic, more Johnny Yule. I'd like to see more Nestori and Kunda. I mean, seeing how they all go, but I mean, at the moment, they're just, they're going to be stuck in a bit of a hole unless they don't just change some things in that starting lineup.
Yeah, in a Super Series length season before the World Cup, you're right, the Spanish players were good. How disruptive, as another plane goes overhead, so many today, this city.
Can't even hear it, Taylor, don't stress.
Good. How disruptive has Zach Clough actually being fit and ready to play and ready to start been to the team? Because he looked so good in preseason and he's still a good individual player, but his utilization within this team seems disruptive to what was working before the World Cup break. And you're right. How is Louis Dorigo coping sitting on the bench at this point of his career? I mean, he has, 80 A-League appearances. He's now working his way into his 20s. I mean, it makes no sense that he's having to bide his time behind guys with a combined age of 72.
A few comments coming in, and I like to see everyone's comments. Angelo pointing out Adelaide United's deep-lying mids are only 39 and 40 years of age, going well. A-Liga, Adelaide United equals cross spam. Alan Riley, whose comments we can very rarely see for some reason. Jack Pantelio said that every youth player, Popovic, Mandanha, Gauchi, were all played out of necessity, while Alagic, Yule, Irankunda, Dorigo, Jovanovic see no minutes, but Carl is a youth whisperer. Yeah, some good.
We've talked about on
bits.
this show in the past about how Adelaide are fantastic at bringing youngsters into their A-League men's squad and exposing them, bringing them off the bench and getting people excited. But they're just not very good at taking that next step and actually making them week in and week out contributors. I mean, Popovic is starting regularly, which is a good thing. But yeah, that's a right comment. And I mean, look at the amount of young players that are beginning to break through at Adelaide and then leaving because they're not starting regularly.
You know, I think it's another indictment on Adelaide is the four teams they've beaten. Yeah. Western United, Perth twice, Victory. So Western United disaster this season. Yeah, Western United disaster this season, and then Victory and Perth are two bottom teams.
Bottom 3 teams.
So I don't know. I look at Adelaide, and I think basically we were probably riding high on Craig Goodwin's individual form.
And I mean, Craig Goodwin can still win them games. Like, basically,
yeah, sure.
I'd like if you tell me that Craig Goodwin single-handedly won a game against any team other than Melbourne City this season, I'd believe it. Just the league's mediocre enough that somebody like Craig Goodwin can go out and have himself a day and win a game.
But then that says a little bit about Adelaide United, the club and the team and the coach, that if one guy stars, Mr. Goals and Assists gets his goals and assists, then we're good. Anything beyond that, we're going to struggle. I don't know. I think Adelaide, I'm going to give them a 4 out of 10. Debano?
I'm going to give them as well 4. Not too impressed with them at all.
I'm revising my victory score down to a 2, and I'm giving Adelaide 4.
Yeah, that's good.
If that's the case, then because I gave Victory a 4 as well, I'll give Victory a 3. So,
all right,
not good.
I'm going to give
Victory 3.5.
I'm going to give Adelaide a 5 because they're 6. They're 6. They're mid. They're 6. They're mid-table. They're 5. They're XG. They're basically they're pretty close to their XG. Their XG and their XG conceded. So they're pretty much, they are who we thought they were. Mid. 5 out of 10.
Let's mutually terminate a player. Everyone's favorite part of the show. Get in the comments if you want to mutually terminate. I will mutually terminate one day. Lo siento, pero es tiempo.
Anyone with aspirations in real estate is welcome to shuffle on.
I wouldn't be targeting a specific playing group. I would be targeting actually playing some of these younger players consistently for 90 minutes week in and week out and letting them actually mess up and then just not immediately yanking them out as a result.
Yeah.
Debano.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. Also, if Javi Lopez isn't back anytime soon, I'm not too sure what his situation is. I'd be targeting a right back because I feel sorry for Madania. He's never played right back in his life. He started 2 games at right back. Thought he was all right against the Glory, but I mean, it's a bit hard on a youngster who's never played right back in his life to just throw him in. Like, there's throwing in the deep end and then there's throwing them in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And I think, that's a bit much. So, similar to Joey, but if they're going to target one position on the field, maybe a right back, either to back up Javi Lopez or, to start if this injury is bad. I'm not too sure what the situation is there.
Change, mutually terminate with build a statue for Halloran and Goodwin. Torres says terminate Viet. Huge.
I've gone full Arnold. You must terminate.
That's not mutual. That's not mutual.
That's not mutual. That's just termination.
That's true.
You just go through the phone book looking for every Carl Viet in the phone book.
I mean, the other thing is you look at who should be looking for
It needs to target Carl Vart as well, just to be on the safe side.
Shout out Josh Parrish.
It's funny. Cameron Hanley says one day and Javi Lopez can fly home together. I quite like Javi Lopez. I think Javi Lopez.
Javi Lopez is fine. He's a good player.
Alan Riley Lopez is touch and go most week with a groin injury, according to Carl. Harry van der Sarg injured as well. Also just not great. But so you mutual termination just on that. I mean, maybe Luis de Riga should be looking to mutually terminate his contract to go somewhere where he can get more opportunities. You can use the mutual termination in many ways, my friends.
This is coming from Torres from Angelo. City's got Galloway and Jemison sitting on the pine. Adelaide's got no one. Wait till you find out where Galloway and Jemison have come from, mate. Do we really want to be encouraging the Adelaide
Yeah.
City and vice versa pathway even more?
It's a good point. All right, let's move on to Brisbane Roar, who are one place above Adelaide United, 5th.
Debano,
Is that okay? You got to say
if you want to dive off for a second, Debano, I understand. I saw something on Keep Up after the Melbourne Victory game. It was a graphic declaring that Brisbane are a force to be reckoned with. Who they are not a force to be reckoned with. They've won 3 games.
Depends what's happening. Force.
They've won 3 games. They've scored 9 goals.
They've only lost once. They've
lost one game, for God's sake.
But that doesn't make them
invincible.
That doesn't make them a force. That makes them resolute. That makes them
immovable.
That makes them immovable. But a movable object, a force.
Joey,
a force implies forward momentum.
This became an argument. This became an argument over a thesaurus rather than an argument over football. Very quickly.
But even at that, is a team that's just sitting back, not conceding any goals. I think the Raw have surpassed my expectations this season. Absolutely. The fact that they are, right in the mix, they're 5th place on the table. They're undefeated in 8 games. They are absolutely surpassing my expectations. But to declare them a force is results-based analysis in the extreme. Like right now, they're not a force by any stretch of the imagination. They're underperforming their XG.
You are reading into things too much, Joey. It's summer. It's sunny outside. There's many things to be happy about.
I am correcting the narrative.
Stoll, do you think there's enough fun in the A-League during this conversation?
Yeah, it's true. Shut up, both of you. All right. Angelo says Ross Heiner is back, baby. Alan Riley says funnest team in the league.
Agreed.
Cameron says Isaac Newton has entered the chat. What is a force? What is not a force? A-Liga says Brisbane Raw anti-football. Alan Riley says Brisbane at this season's MacArthur reincarnation. Last year was very critical of MacArthur.
MacArthur shipped a lot of goals last season. They couldn't defend. They were playing like Craig Moon at wing back. Brisbane just don't concede.
What I'll say is, Brisbane Raw, you looked at this squad at the start of the season, and you look at it actually every time they announce at 11, and you're like, geez, these guys, right? It's rough. And then, you got to work with what you've got. And the fact that they're in 5th and they've only lost once is credit to Warren Moon. Now,
absolutely. Warren Moon deserves credit for Warren Moon is achieving credit. He's achieving what he wants to achieve.
Okay, great. Let me get to my point. You had your point. You started with an oof, and then you talked about a dictionary definition for 4 minutes. Look, here's basically what it is. Is this team watchable? No, this team is not watchable. All right. That's just the hard reality of it. Especially because they play out of the Dolphin Stadium up in Redcliffe, and no one wants to go. Brisbane Roar is the team I miss every week. Like Brisbane Roar's playing, especially at home. I'm like, yep, cool. That's one I'll definitely catch the highlights of and not actually watch live.
On Tuesday night till 10:30 to watch them play Perth Glory.
Man, you know what?
Hang on, I'm probably going to be commentating that, so I think you should.
Yeah,
I'll be watching it. I will be
listening to the audio of it and looking at something else on my second screen.
Hey, good enough.
I actually enjoy that about the Paramount app. You can play the sounds whilst
Careful
the screen's
now.
off.
No, I agree.
No, that's a good thing about the Paramount app. You can play the sounds while the screen's off, so I can plug it into my car and I can use it as sort of like a radio call while I'm driving from point A to point B. I like that feature.
SCN, don't listen to SCN, Joey.
Why would I listen to SCN when I can listen to Teo?
Oh, well, I'm saying when Teo's not calling.
Oh, big fan of
anyway,
Robbie Thompson.
Let's bring it back. I'm going to give Brisbane, and genuinely, I had no idea because I'm not watching them. I had no idea they'd only lost 1 game. I assumed they'd lost at least 5, right? So for that reason alone, I will give them a 6 out of 10. What say you, Teo?
No, agree. The team on the pitch, Warren Moon, 6 out of 10. The overall club, a lot less. But credit to the players and Moon himself.
Joey?
Also in agreement, 6 out of 10. Pretty much also in alignment on Teo about the differentiation between Moon and the squad and the club as a whole. I get the feeling that they're banking a lot on being able to find a Charlie Austin replacement in the January transfer window, and the goals will start flowing. I'm not as confident in that because, as we've just discussed with Melbourne Victory, it's a chain. It's all interconnected. You need a defense and a midfield putting balls on a plate for these sort of guys. But for what they've tried to accomplish to this point, actually 6.5 out of 10.
Devano.
Thank you, Run the Memes. I do like a good almond tortoise. I'm going to give Brisbane a 7 out of spite for Joey out of his comments. But also the fact that I think they've really performed, because I'm pretty sure if I remember my own predictions, I think I had them to finish last this season. So the fact that they're doing this well,
I think I did too.
I think I did too.
So the fact that they're really overachieving at this stage, and to be fair, considering how even the competition is, I don't see them and the way they play falling completely off a cliff and say like dropping to bottom unless something drastic changes, because they're so well organized defensively. Like they're going to keep getting points on the board. And if you don't like it, too bloody bad, because they're going to get draws, they're going to get wins, and how tight this competition is. That's all that matters at this stage. Like you've seen with so many teams, like even Wellington, like they've only lost 3 games, but they're still right up there because they've been able to get draws. So for me, Brisbane have done a good job. If they get a new number 9, it's probably not going to change everything straight away, because there are, as you mentioned, Joey, concerns about how to actually progress the ball and get the ball into the area. But I've got to say one other point that I think has been one little bright spark for Brisbane this season, that we've spoken about the defense, but from an attacking point of view, has been the form of Carlo Armiento. I think he's an unbelievably, very talented player who I think, it's great to see him flourish post-injury. And really start to fulfill his potential that he's shown in sort of little bits at Adelaide and mainly at Perth. And he scored some great goals this season. So I think that they've still got to address a few other areas before they just go out and sign a striker. But to be honest, guys, I wouldn't be surprised if they end up making the top 6. And they might get there playing very sort of catenaccio football. But you know what? If it gets points, it gets points. And that's what it could be at the end of the day. Like, again, it sounds very much RBA, but who's breaking them down? Not only is only one team beaten them, but only one team scored more than once against them. That's Melbourne City. Everyone else is falling into the same problems against them too. So it'll be curious to see if that continues in the weeks to come, because, right now it's actually going all right for them.
Agree. Although I do worry that when you're already struggling to get crowds because of stadium-based issues like Geraldo was mentioning in the chat, I do think unwatchable football is a bigger issue than, sometimes people, there's been plenty of teams that have been unwatchable and have gotten decent crowds, but Brisbane Roar aren't doing that. So in terms of who I would...
We have a living proof with our defending champions. Which we'll
get onto them in a second.
Issues though, Teo. I think that, there's still a, I'm not going to get into it anyways.
Who I would mutually terminate. Riku Danzaki. Why? I really like Riku Danzaki. I really enjoy watching him play football. I don't enjoy watching Brisbane Roar. Let's get him to a club where I'm going to watch. All right. So therefore, release my favorite player. Mutual termination, Riku Danzaki. Teo, you're the only one who seems to actually participate in this game properly. Who say you?
The owners.
Yes, that's true.
My mouth didn't move.
You actually are going to have to get mutual to get rid of those guys. It's going to have to be quite a payout. Joey?
I agree with Teo.
Hey, Joey, what shirt are you wearing? Because it looks like you're wearing an FBI shirt, and I really hope it's not one of those FBI comedy shirts.
No, it's just a flat-out actual FBI shirt I bought in Washington.
Thank God.
Yeah, he stole it from Nick. It's one of those full-blooded Italian ones.
Munzio. There's Vito.
If ever you instantly want to make me think you're an idiot, wear one of the FBI comedy shirts that you see at cheap markets in Paddy's markets here in Sydney. Nick, who are you going to get mutual with?
I'm going to get mutual with signing a new player, and that's going to be in midfield and also bringing in a new number 9.
Boring. All right. Taya, you mentioned them before. Western United, defending champions. Let's see how they're going this season. Not very well. They're in 10th position. They've played 11 games. So Victory and Perth could technically leapfrog them once they play those catch-up games. 3 wins, 2 draws, 6 losses, 14 goals scored. And I guess this is the big headline for them. Their season last season was built on 1-0, 1-0, 1-0. 23 goals shipped.
What a time to have bought the slide on all of their defenders that had lost value in fantasy. I'm carrying negatives every week from Leo Lacroix. I mean, he's Cruyff turning into his own net at this point. The great Danish player, Johan Cruyff. I mean, Garuccio worked out for a couple of weeks, but man, buying the slide on Western's defense, expecting them to come good, has been an absolute disaster. I feel like I went and purchased some utility for the token well and truly there.
Joey, what are your thoughts on Western so far this season, given you're in their documentary?
I am. Oh, yeah. I feel like this is
Please tell me at least you watched it.
I watched the bits with me in it. I feel like this might be a case of regression to the mean. I think they massively overachieved last season. They feasted on oppositions they flat out gave oppositions the ball and looked to hit on the counter, and they feasted on oppositions that just couldn't function in possession for the most part. Bonkers game in the semi-final to eliminate Victory. And then they jagged an early goal against Melbourne City in the grand final. And because of the midfield composition deployed by City in that grand final, they were pretty much home and hosed. This season, I just think we're seeing the problems that come with relying on Leo Lacroix putting in one of the best defensive seasons this competition has ever seen. Last campaign, Jamie Young, turning into some sort of ninja in the back line and just diving and leaping to keep everything out. Riston and Garuccio putting in seasons that did, they should, if they weren't, we don't know what Graham Arnold was thinking, but if they weren't in Socceroos contention, they should have been based on their seasons from last things. Tamoki Imai, who's been injured this campaign for the most part, but being a revelation last season. Even Nikolai Topor-Stanley, when he was coming in and playing, was being serviceable. And then, fortune smiling upon them at times. And then Prijovic, when they're getting him in and he's begging goals. But just none of that is coming off this season, and they're just regressing to the mean. And I'm just watching them to see, all right, how do you adjust? What are you going to do? And I'm just not seeing any changes as yet that suggest that they're going to be able to either just fix Lacroix, because I've got, there was rumors that he wanted out in the mid-season after an automatic extension clause in his contract kicked in. How are you going to fix him, get him back rolling, and then just how you're going to start scoring more goals and playing better football than just when play bogs down, lump it long to Prijovic and hope he can hold the play up and get things going. Because now that's just not winning games.
Can I cut to the chase? I mean, Western United, in fairness, were holding out for a transfer fee on Prijovic. But if these guys are under contract, we talk about getting mutual. Are they now playing so badly that the club has no choice but to get mutual with them? Because you'd rather do that than have them Bruno Fornaroli their way through the rest of the season, sitting in the grandstand, if at the venue at all.
I don't think Prijovic is playing that badly.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I think, to that point, you're bang on there, Joe. I don't think Prijovic has been, for all the rumours basically swirling around him, I think he's been pretty good. I think they've actually played better with Prijovic coming back. Since he's come back, they've actually started to, they're actually getting some points. But yesterday, particularly, was a massive smash in the teeth, and just sort of summed up everything that sort of, all the problems that Western United have had, beyond, Lacroix's dip in form and everything like that. It goes to show one thing I've really noticed is that, when they concede early, that's it. Like they just fall to bits because we know that, you know, when West United can get set and they can take the lead, they can put numbers behind the ball, they can choke an opposition out. They're a bloody hard team to break down. But yesterday was like what Melbourne City did to them was just unbelievable. It was actually quite stark in the difference in quality between attack and defense, considering what Western United did to them only a few months ago in the grand final. And yeah, I think there are some big concerns. I mean, I think in that centre-back partnership, they've got to, as you mentioned, Taylor, got to have some sort of big conversations with Leo Lacroix as to where his head's at, you know, because, I mean, he's had, 2 suspensions, I think now? 1 or 2 suspensions. He's missed some games when he's played. I mean, bar maybe the game against Brisbane when he wasn't really tested. He hasn't he's been at fault for quite a few goals this season. And you got to ask the question, well, is it better served, like, even if we can't sell him, like maybe starting to look at, you know, if there's an option to potentially offload him, to maybe open up that dialogue and say, look, you know what, just for the betterment of the club, if you don't want to be here, you don't, like, maybe it's time to go.
Could he be the defensive answer for Melbourne Victory? But then Victory get mutual with someone that signs for Western.
I get
so
a
like
sense
they have
that's a trade, Teo. You're talking about a trade.
This is not
trade week.
A-League trade week.
Teo,
Excuse me. Trades happen all the time in the A-League.
Hey, hold on. But if Western United can offer a future first,
it's a footy reference,
or a steak knives, I don't know if Victory have a David Spriggs or a James Rowley they can offer here, Teo, to throw in. Maybe, you know, a couple of young.
Leo Lacroix isn't Brad Otten's Nick.
Yeah, well, he's like, I don't know, trying to think of a recent trade. Like, he's a fallen, you know, he's an A-plus player.
He's Brody Grundy. He used to be the best in the league. He used to be the best in the league in his position, and now he's not.
Yeah, but Grundy didn't fall to that level. But anyway, so that's going to go right down the rabbit hole here, and I'm going to, you know, anyway. But what I was saying was, I think that, you know, there's some certain areas they've really got to start addressing, and it's not as if they don't have the talent. That's what's the frustrating part, that they have some really talented players in that team that are waiting in the wings. I wrote a piece on Keep Up last week about, you know, I spoke to Nick Milanovic after the Brisbane game, and you saw the 4 kids that came on between himself, Dylan Piraeus, Reece Bozanovsky, and Noah Botic all come on and change the game. I feel like, you know, not even just myself, but a lot of people have been screaming into, you know, sort of the void, saying like, we need to see more of them, you know, because there is a lot of talented youngsters in that team, but just got to give them the opportunity to actually, you know, flourish. And it feels like it's not just the Western United problem. You know, there's so many other teams that fall into that bracket as well. But, you know, is it better served to get minutes into Bozanovsky, Milanovic, Piraeus, you know, these sort of players, and just see if they can go? Because, you know, if these sort of older players aren't pulling their weight and performing, I mean, I said at the start they had to shake things up, and they haven't really. They got Prijovic back and things sort of worked out for them. But, you know, against better teams like Melbourne City, I mean, they're just going to carve right through you. So I think they've got some big questions coming out of this period. I think yesterday was a real sort of, if the early season form wasn't a wake-up call, yesterday was probably the biggest, because they never looked likely. It didn't even look like getting back into the game either. So that's coming up against the benchmark. So that's sort of, if you're weighing up against the best team in the league at full strength, and that's what you're coming up against when you're basically at full strength as well, then there's some big concerns going forward. So I'd be curious to see if they bounce back. But, you know, I have my concerns about Western United.
3 happy carrots, A-League trade week, the first week of January every year. Every team allowed a free trade with another team. I like this idea. Talks about putting more fun in the league. Lacroix for Miranda. Who says no?
I mean, the most fun would be to
Victory.
just have a transfer system between the teams, so we can, because, I mean, you look at the biggest driver of news and traffic and social media talk, it's transfers. The A-League has robbed itself of that news cycle. That would be fun. You know, a lot of people think they're the Fabrizio Romano of the A-League. Let's actually have a Fabrizio Romano of the A-League.
Here we go. Joey, you say that Miranda, that Victory would say no. Do you reckon 100% they say no?
Yeah, because right now, I don't think anybody's giving up an asset like Miranda for Leo Lacroix in the form that he's in. The ceiling...
So go on, Joey.
The ceiling that, yes, Lacroix was better than Miranda was last season, but it wasn't by a lot. Roderick was pretty good last season. So, and given that Miranda's just coming back from injury, and isn't Lacroix has because he's had a 2-game suspension. Lacroix played 9 games. Lacroix has scored an own goal in a third of his appearances this season. And he's got a red card and a straight red card in another one. Like the way Miranda played last season, you're not giving him up for that.
Lacroix, Kilkenny for Rai Marchand and George Timothea. Who says no?
Western United.
Western United says no.
So Joe Stoll, we've got to think about salary. Does a team have a salary cap dump? How in the NBA they get rid of players on an expiring contract for 4 months and they just go, we're tanking this season.
Luis Nani's contract has been traded to Perth Glory for prospects.
Cash considerations.
A player to be named later.
The other thing, I can't remember, does Popovich really like Kilkenny, or did he have a falling out with him in the end? I feel like he really likes it from memory.
I think
because they were together at Perth, and I feel
Kilkenny endears himself to most coaches that he works with because he tries really hard.
Except for Warren Joyce.
Who didn't fall out with Warren Joyce? Scott Jamieson didn't fall out with Warren Joyce. But yeah, Warren Joyce fell out with a lot of people.
Richie Delat.
All right, here we go. People are proposing their trades. This is exactly what I wanted to see. Lockie Flanagan, who's a coward and refuses to come on the show. He's just
come on the show, Lockie. You've got the link. Yeah.
Lacroix for Roderick Miranda and a future 2nd-round pick. I like it. We don't have a draft yet. We don't have promotion relation. We don't have a lot of things. But you got to build for the future.
That would send the SEN talkback line into a frenzy if that happens. Jesus Christ! Imagine Finey's final siren when that came through. Bloody hell.
All right, challenge for the comment section. Put in your trades and let us know what they are. Daniel, you've made a reference to wrestling, so I'm just going to ignore that completely. Unlucky. All right, Debano, give me your rating for Western United out of 10.
3.
Teo.
1.
Uno, the lowest. The defending champions, worse than Victory. Wow. Joey?
Sorry for having expectations of them. 1.
I said they win the championship this season, so do I have egg on my face right now?
Joey?
2.5.
Oh, man, I'm going to have to be Mr. Positive. I'm going to go 3.5.
It's like what...
You're going to be the star of their next documentary, Stoll.
But no, what Teo said is actually really important there. They're the defending champions. There should be, they're the defending champions who returns almost every key contributor from that championship winning team. There should be expectations for them to kick on with it. They should be being held to a higher standard this year. Like these results, if you put these results absolutely are worse than the results that Perth Glory are putting in this year. Because even though Perth Glory are last, they're coming from a wooden spoon last season and Western United were champions.
Too many people started believing in them, Joey.
Evidently, by their crowds, not enough people started believing in them. Blake Hampton says retro for Dorigo. I like it a lot.
That's a fleece. That's a fleece.
I like it. Wait, who do you think's getting the better end of that deal?
Sydney. Younger prospect, 6 or 7 years younger.
Bimby really likes Palo Retro, and Retro's played a lot of games in the A-League. You're getting a pretty experienced midfielder to probably come in and you know what? And Adelaide would be looking at it thinking, we need a midfielder to come in and replace one day Nisais. So maybe Retro's their guy. I quite like that, Blake. That's a really good one. All right, quick. Anyone want to mutually terminate anyone from Western United before we move on? I would say Lacroix. I think it's gotten to the point where it has gotten too bad, and that's who I'd get rid. Anyone want to change on that? Joey?
I'm trying to think who I target for them. Probably just play Milanovic more. Maybe experiment with something other than a double pivot.
He wants to get rid of Kilkenny. All right, good to know. Debano, if you don't play this game, I'll play it for you.
No.
That's fun. That's fun.
No. Centre back. Get a new defender.
So you want to get rid of Lacroix? Just say it, my friend. Lacroix.
No, I'm
Ciao.
saying get a new centre back in, or play Ben Collins. Try something new.
Hey, Angelo is saying Pasquale. I assume he means for mutual termination, which I agree because I would like to see Pasquale play. I hear good things. I would like to see
somewhere.
Even in the
Yeah,
NPL, I would like to see him play.
I mean, NPL kicks off next month, so ostensibly we should be seeing a bunch of young players leaving. This is actually, an important point. This is right now. If you are a young player, it's 10 games into the A-League men's season, and you think you're not going to be playing games. Right now is the point where you absolutely need to be considering moving to an NPL club where you can play games at a decent enough level, because next season the national. Let me finish. Because next season you've got the national second division coming in, and effectively next year the target date is 2024. You've got a national second division coming in. You need to be playing. If you want to use the national second division as a springboard onto better things, you figure it's not happening in the A-League men's. You absolutely need to be putting yourself in the shop window this season. You can't just bank on these potential NSD sides that are already planning for what their inaugural squads will look like to think, oh, he was on the books of Central Coast or Newcastle or Brisbane. Let's sign him. No, you need to think about whether or not it's in your best interest to be playing.
You've massively overthought this. They will sign players off like a 2-day trial that they've never heard of in their life.
100%. They'll go Pasquale, Wikipedia. He played at Ajax. Oh, yeah, 100%.
Brisbane Raw signed Mensah Katishi off dodgy DVDs. Do you really think someone's going to be thinking about what they're doing in 2024 today? Come on.
Where were you a year ago? Come on.
I will say, to back up Joey on this point, just playing devil's advocate, there are quite a few players who have shown that even before there was national second division, that sometimes going down a tier, going to NPL and actually using that season as a springboard to come back into the A-League is not a bad idea. Like someone like, for instance, I mean, Joe Knowles was different because he was made mutual with Perth Glory, but you look at what it's done for his career. Like you could probably rattle off probably about 10, 12, 14 players, probably even just the Melbourne teams that could probably go down and probably should consider going down to the NPL because they're not playing and there's no A-League youth right now. So like, if there's an opportunity to go and play for Bentley Greens or for Avondale next season, it's not the worst decision.
What I meant though is with Pasquale specifically, I wouldn't mind seeing him play for Western United's team in the NPL too. I mean, there's no guarantees that Melbourne City and Western United will avoid relegation in NPL 2 this coming winter. So why not watch how they respond to that sort of adversity in that sort of environment? I mean, they're probably both going to be fighting for their lives in a really strong league.
Matt Olson says Dylan Wenzel Hall mutual termination, so he can go back to the Raw as the number 9. Problem solved. Interesting. I have a feeling he wouldn't want to get mutual with that because he's on some good coin apparently.
And I don't think that fixed Brisbane Raw's 9 problems.
No.
All right. Let's move on because we mentioned Retro before. Let's move on to Sydney FC. Sydney FC right now, as it stands, let me just bring up the table, which is in one of my tabs. They're in 8th position, 11 games played, 4 wins, 1 draw, 6 losses, which is kind of the big headline there. 16 goals for, 9-10 against, -3 goal difference. Victory and Perth could be equal on points with them at the very least when they play their game. So rough start to the season for Sydney FC. Look, I think it's been a massive disappointment. I'll just start with that. I think, the new stadium, it was meant to be the new era for Sydney FC, this new glorious era, back to kind of the top. They're meant to be one of the biggest teams in the country, and I believe that's where they should be aiming to be. They've barely won any games at home. I'm not sure if they've won any A-League games at home. Yes, of course.
It's hilarious. I literally asked Steve Corica in an interview before the season, seeing what happened with Western Sydney Wanderers when they moved into their new stadium. How are you going to avoid pulling a Western Sydney Wanderers? Right now, they're pulling a Western Sydney Wanderers in their new stadium. It's remarkable. And I mean, you look at like you've gone through there some of the things there. Like you look at their advanced stats, they're underperforming both their XG and their XG conceded at this point in time. Their XG conceded is 15.7 per FOTMob. They've conceded 19. Their XG is 19, and they've only scored 16. So they're underperforming their metrics based on that front. But at this point, it is really getting to the space where like clubs do operate off RBA. And I mean, right now, Stoll, like if you don't say the joke that you put in the chat yesterday, I'm going to steal it from you about the children's dance. But Corica's fate seems to change every single result.
I remember it.
It's the hokey pokey with Steve Corica. You put your Corica in, your Corica's out. You put your Corica in and you shake him all about. It's basically what it is. Every time they win a game, things maybe are settling down and then they lose and we're straight back here. The way they lost against Wellington, I mean, it was hilarious. I mean, it was objectively hilarious, aside under the pump, getting 2 late penalties to equalise and missing both against 9 men. It's just hilarious. It could be any team and it would be hilarious. It was just on this occasion, it was Sydney FC. But that really felt like you examined Sydney fan sentiment. That really felt like, where do they go from here? I mean, but where do they go from here? We discussed on the Sydney episode, as the Christmas episode. If they were going to make a change, they've just blown their best time to do it, which would have been the World Cup break. Now, we're heading into a busy stretch of games, and if you're going to make a change, I mean, technically, you could make the change during January, so the new manager can bring in a few faces and all of that sort of stuff. But it's a really difficult situation right now.
One name that I would be interested to see, and I don't know if he's interested in this, but I just thought about it. Paolo Ocon. Recently just got let go by Club Brugge. He was the assistant there when they made the Champions League knockout stage, which I think is very impressive. My understanding is he wants to stay in Europe. I think that's for lifestyle reasons.
His son also plays in Europe as well.
His son is 19 years old, playing for Benfica. So he's not living in the same city as his son. No. So
his whole family's there.
Yeah, but the option of Sydney, I do wonder if that would be a big enough carrot to lure him back. Because I was thinking, who are the names out there? Who would you necessarily go for? Because it's easy to say Corica out, and as kind of Daniel said in the chat, mutual termination, Corica, and I think we're seeing a lot of talk about Corica. It's like, who are you going to get to replace him? And I wonder.
Part of what made yesterday so humorous is that if a loss to Wellington was the final straw for Corica, his most likely replacement is the Wellington coach.
On the touchline as well. They had a few words.
Like that's sort of why it was so funny. Like Wellington, it's like, for Wellington, I've won, but at what cost? Because if they're the ones who ultimately provide the result that sees Corica leave, I have to think that they'll at least be targeting Ufuk. I know Ufuk Tale's applied for the All Whites job, and I think if he gets the All Whites job, he's able to juggle that with Wellington, he probably stays. But I mean, there's reports citing sources surrounding Ufuk Tale to Australia every year for a reason, like by journos that just don't make stuff up. So, and I have to think that if Sydney came calling, Ufuk Tale would consider it.
Blake Hampton says, judging by the crowd's reaction at halftime, a change would be as good as a holiday. Don't know how many are coming back at this point. Like, this is the big problem, is like that stadium needs to be filled as much as Joey needs to maybe put some oil in his chair so it doesn't keep rattling so much. But I think it's like, this is such a missed opportunity. And we just talked about Victory's issues. Sydney FC, like, they've got some massive issues and they need to be doing better. Matt also makes a point, Stoll clearly forgetting Ocon's Mariners with that comment. I think he improved the Mariners. The Mariners are in a really bad spot when he took over, and financially they were really, really struggling. I actually think.
I think we're all just remembering the horses game, like the fact that they were all really up and about. They beat Sydney, and is that just being caught up in that one result style?
I genuinely think he's a better coach than
probably now.
Maybe
yeah,
he gets credit for. Yeah,
probably now, especially. But it depends if he wants to come back here, though. Stoll. That's the thing. Does he want to come back?
Yeah. No, I don't know. But it's just a name I'm putting out there because I just think it's very easy, and it kind of gets. I get a bit bored with people just saying, "Get rid of the coach." Okay, well, who are you going to bring in? Because that's the key.
You're talking about Ocon. What about David Zrilic?
No comment on Zrilla. Cannot speak to that at all. Great guy. Big fan.
I prefer not to speak.
Devano.
No, I think, Sydney's got some big questions right now. As mentioned in the Christmas episode, doesn't matter what sort of players they bring in right now. It's all going to come down to system. Will the tactics actually change? I mean, he went from the 4-4-2 now to the 4-3-3. And right now, things haven't really they haven't had the uptick that they want. Like, I mean, at one point, they were blaming having injuries and not having defensive reinforcements. Well, now they've got their guys back. Jack Rodwell's back. James Donaghy's back. And I know I still have Alex Wilkinson, but how much can you rely on Alex Wilkinson at this stage of his career? Very similar with sort of Victory and Matt Sporanovic, but probably even worse because he's 38 years old now. So, yeah, there's some real big concerns with Sydney FC going forward. And how they didn't at least get something against the Wellington team with 9 players and having 2 penalties, like not 1, but 2 in the last bloody dying minutes, not even to score one of them. Like, it's not working out for them right now. I think they'll probably see it out with Corica for the season, though. As you mentioned, like, I just don't think that there's anyone that's kind of like right now that's sort of like an obvious target to just kind of go, yeah, we need to like get him in now while we're going to strike while the iron's hot. So I think that they'll stick it out with Corica. I mean, they just signed him to a new deal to use the TNCs, and I know you hate Stoll. I mean, you made your bed, now you've got to sleep in it. So they've signed into the contract. They've got to see it out. And if it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, well, there's going to be big questions, I think, in this offseason. So, I mean, the weird thing about this season is that, like, he can win 2 or 3 games. He's going to have the false cap bounce and get back into the top 6. And people will start saying, well, yeah, Sydney's back on track. Like, I mean, he could still easily sneak him into the top 6, as could any of these teams under pressure right now. So, yeah, it'll be an interesting few months to come, but I think they probably will. I think personally they'll stick it out with him for the rest of the season. I can't see them changing now.
Yeah, I think they stick with Corica as well. I mean, I never like to call for, like I said, that's why I'm refusing to take part in this mutual termination game. I don't like to call for people to lose their livelihoods. But even so, I think
losing their livelihoods. They're going somewhere else. All right.
I think Sydney, if nothing else, even if they did decide to make a change, I think they'd be slaves to the sunk cost fallacy, and they just, they just were in it for the rest of the season now, rather than make a break. So even if they wanted to, I don't think they would. Got to say though, after that loss to Wellington, you wouldn't want to be the bloke that wrote a great big feature article about how Adam Lafondra was the best penalty taker in the world.
A, I wrote that a long time ago, and B, he was one of the best penalty takers in the world. And if I was employed to write a follow-up on that, I would write a follow-up and say he struggled with, and I could interview them and say, did the pressure of my amazingly well-written article that put added pressure on him, does he now feel like he needs to live up to that reputation? Does that play on his mind when he strikes the ball? Probably. Do keepers now take did keepers watch it and take extra note on how he takes penalties and now say they're better at saving it? Well, am I the big factor in it?
Yes. Too much.
No, so here we go. Shout out to Vince Regari, George Clark, whoever goes out to the next Sydney FC training session. Ask Adam Lafondra, when you're taking a penalty, are you thinking when you're taking a penalty, are you thinking about Nick Stoll? And you can report back to us.
And if he says no, I'll say, well, you should. You'd be doing better. All right.
You know what, just quickly, like, what went through that? Like, did he just go and get the ball and take the second penalty? Or was there someone that might have turned around and said, hey, mate, like, you missed the first one. Like, maybe we'll go with someone else. It's very rare in those situations to see someone go again, like, seconds later and take the second penalty,
You know what? Probably he got the ball again, and they go, "Oh, geez, do you remember Nick Stoll's articles from like 3 years ago where he talked about how good LaFondra was on pens? You know, I'll probably let him take the second one, even though he's missed the first one. But he has his record since I wrote that's been actually not. So he was at basically converting, like, I think 92% or something. He's definitely, a little bit. I feel bad. A couple
Hasn't
of
been a
comments
good month for English penalty takers.
No, it has never been a good month in the history of time for English penalty takers. Torres says Muscat to Sydney, if for nothing more than to add to the A-Liga chaos. I agree. I think that'd be very funny. Monty, okay, whoever keeps bringing up the comments, can you just wait till I read out the comments? There's a way that we host this show. There's a way we do it. And as you can see, Joey's put his hand up. Guilty.
Stop,
Angelo,
Monty
says... Euphemism. Monty better than Uffy. Yeah, I mean, we'll get on to the Mariners in a second, but it's a good point. Monty's stock is rising. I wouldn't be surprised if Monty's looking at a job overseas, especially because my understanding is he holds a British passport. Also, the key will be whether he holds a UEFA Pro license, because that can be one of the biggest barriers to getting a job in Europe. So I don't know what his situation is there. Daniel says penalty. Yep, made that point before. Hiraldo, the thinking of Sydney FC's front office when deciding to persist with Corica in the off season and then the World Cup break. It's the vibe. Yeah, it's not a good vibe, but let's just keep going. And then so that's basically it.
I've just checked his LinkedIn. Nick Montgomery has a UEFA Pro license.
Wow.
Yeah, so you know what? He would go overseas, I reckon. I reckon he'll do well with the Mariners, and then I think he'll try and move straight overseas. I wouldn't think he's going to take over Sydney FC, try and rebuild them. You know, that's going to take a season or two at best. Potential. The risk is it doesn't work out, and then he never gets the opportunity to go overseas. So I think he'll try and jump straight to overseas, especially if Mariners finish top 2 this season. While we're on there, let's talk about the Mariners. They are in the top 2 at the moment, I believe.
Giving a grade for Sydney?
Oh, yeah, that's right. Sorry. Look, I'm doing a lot of this podcast. I'm hosting, bringing up comments, Sydney FC.
Marta. All right.
I will give them a 3.5.
3.
I think it's been really poor. Joey?
Yeah, 3.
2.5. For the same thing. I just Sydney FC, Melbourne Victory. These clubs are held to a higher standard because it's the standard they've told us to hold them to. So I'll do it. And right now they're not meeting the standard that they've told us to hold them to. So 2.5.
In terms of getting mutual, I mean, they've got issues at centre back, so you kind of don't want to say Jack Rodwell, but Jack Rodwell's been a massive disappointment, and you would imagine would be on some decent coin. I know you guys like to play this game, so where would you think they should strengthen?
You just said it.
You've got to... Sorry, you go first, Abana.
Oh, sorry. Centre back and in central midfield.
I think you've got to make a call about whether LaFondra is the guy still, if Pat Wood should be the guy, or if neither of them are the guy and you need somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. LaFondra definitely looks past his best, but I would kind of persist with him at least till the end of this season and then look to upgrade. All right, let's talk about the Mariners.
Not Pat Wood at all?
No, I don't mind Pat Wood. And I definitely kind of rotate him in and give him chances, but I haven't seen enough from Pat Wood to be like, yeah, Pat Wood is who I want to be the number 9 for Sydney FC every week. I think that's a big step up. And if they're just going to play with a single number 9, which looks like they are, I haven't seen enough yet. Now, give him chances, give him opportunities off the bench, give him opportunities, in games, rotate him in, Let's see, especially if, this season's not working out in LaFondra's form. Like, I don't think LaFondra's form, especially right now, is enough to keep him in there every week. But I don't see enough, build this attack around Pat Wood yet. But, hopefully he comes good because he was very good in the youth league and the NPL. All right, Mariners. 6 wins, 1 draw, 4 losses, 24 goals scored. That's the most in the league. 14 goals conceded, 19 points. Second in the table. Doing really well, I'd say. I think they did all right last season under him. They're doing even better this season. They had the kind of disruption of multiple players, 3 players going off to the World Cup. And I think, we talked about Popper's stock falling and, talk about Bimby's stock falling. Monty's is going through the roof. He's probably doing, his stock is probably heading where I thought Pappas's stock would have gone. Because we all thought Pappas was this good young Australian coach who, was going to do really well and play exciting football and da-da-da. The Mariners, I wouldn't say the football is amazing, but it's good. It's, it has its moments. There's some good, fun moments from that team. And I think he's done a lot with kind of limited resources and identified some good players. And, my understanding is he was the one who brought the Quolls to the club in the first place anyway. Even before he was head coach. That's kind of part of his remit. So it seems like he's been a massive asset for that club. And
that's my understanding. That Alua was going to sign with Melbourne Knights is what I heard before Nick Montgomery came calling. Imagine what that would look like.
You've got to give Montgomery credit for not only, we talked about this before, probably identifying the right players, then bringing them through in the right way and utilizing him. In fact, Montgomery is someone who, if you're at Sydney FC, you look at and go, can we bring you in? Like I said, I don't know if he'll go, but even beyond coaching, is he someone who should be in a kind of technical director role? If he's got these traits and da-da-da. Now, whether he wants to be, that's another question. He wants to obviously focus on coaching right now, but I think it's been a great season for the Mariners.
Well, first thing, on Nick Montgomery, actually doing some checking, we can claim him as an Aussie coach. He's an Aussie citizen. So he's got citizenship, even if he does retain a British passport. But I think one of the most important things that you touched on there, Stoll, was under resource. Like the Mariners are just doing, they're doing an exceptional job for a club. Like we talk about the expectations, such are the resources that Sydney FC and Melbourne Victories and the like have. They have these higher expectations. The Mariners are just massively overperforming the resources that they have available to them, and you just have to give them credit for that. They're doing the best with what they have. In fact, it's going so well. Like their championship content, it's probably unfortunate for them right now that they've got this dominant Melbourne City team atop the A-League men that I can't see anybody taking the title off for, because if City were just and also like on the level of everybody else in the league, I reckon the Mariners would absolutely be possibly title favourites. But it's just because Melbourne City are there and they're doing so well with their massive resources that it's still difficult to see just how the Mariners can overcome that deficit. But the fact that we're even having this conversation and talking about those hypotheticals shows how good they are doing with what they have right now. And I think you have to give them massive credit for that.
Tabano?
Yeah, every year, the last 3 seasons now, whether it was, with Stadge and now with Nick Montgomery, particularly now, very impressed with the football they've been playing. I mean, on the stage, they played a bit more defensive, a bit more pragmatic. I mean, they got results playing that sort of, again, same formation, but now they're a bit more proactive. I mean, they're a fun team to watch. I think they're probably the most fun team to watch in the league right now. And as Joey said, this team continues to bat above their average, and it's unbelievable. I mean, and the players they keep unearthing, whether it's, the youngsters like Quoll, even, giving opportunities to guys like Max Ballard and Harry Steele who have come through and Dan Hall and those sort of players. It's the players they're signing, like Brian Kaltak. Who would have thought, this 29-year-old who hadn't played professionally ever in his career, was playing in NPL South Australia, was playing all through the Pacific, in New Zealand, a Netflix star. Like he was one of the subjects of that Captain series that's on Netflix right now with like Luka Modric and stuff, like sort of detailing his...
Is that where Monty saw him? was just
Maybe,
flicking through Netflix.
maybe.
Was like, let's sign him.
No, he didn't, because last season he had him on trial and then he was going to sign him, but he did his knee on trial, or the knee, so got injured on trial. Sorry. So then like they said to him, look, we can't do anything for this season, but come back next year, and we'll give you another opportunity. Moresche got hurt. Injury replacement contract for Brian Kaltak. He's come in. He's been sensational. I mean, he's won our belt. Like, that's almost the biggest term of endearment. Like, he's been sensational. And they just keep finding a way. And as you mentioned, Joey, like, I wouldn't be surprised if these guys, they're in the grand final at the end of the season. Like, there's enough quality. And they got a guy up top by the name of Jason Cummings, who is starting to hit his straps again post-World Cup, and he's playing some beautiful football at the moment. He's got a good partnership up there with Marco Tullio, who's really also starting to hit his straps right now. And I'm excited for it. I'm very bullish about how they're going. So I'm just going to flow this in, because I know we're getting close to the 2 hour mark. My rating for them, 8.5 out of 10 this season. And the player or the area on the pitch they should be targeting to two-pronged answer, because I saw a comment in regards to this. Brian Kaltak on a full-time contract, and 2, going to get themselves potentially another winger to replace Garang Kuol. Or if you've got someone in the youth academy who potentially could be the next Garang who's coming through, who could potentially really explode onto the scene in the next few months, unleash him, unleash hell. I want to see it. I'm excited for it. Sorry to steal a PKism along the way.
Here's the comment you're referring to. Ryan's Rovers says, get mutual with Kelechi John and sign Brian Kaltak to a full-time deal. Joey?
I think looking at this Mariners, I'm going to give them an 8 out of 10 as well. I am there is what slightly concerned. You look at they are outperforming their XG by a decent amount. Their XG is 19.7. They've scored 24 goals so far this season. But then you also look at the fact that Jason Cummings feels like he's already had half a dozen goals disallowed. On top of all that, you do have to allow for the possibility that maybe they're just not, maybe the reason they're just outperforming them isn't luck. It's just that they're really good at finishing, especially considering years past as well. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. But yeah, giving them 8 out of 10. What I'd be interested to see looking at them going forward, maybe looking at that midfield, not so much maybe a starter, but maybe just like a little bit more added grunt to them this season. And then also possibly looking, are you satisfied? You've got Danny Vukovic there and Yaron Souza. Danny Vukovic has made a few errors so far this season. Do you are you happy with Yaron Souza as your backup? I like Yaron. He's a great kid. I think he's a talent. But are you happy with Yaron Souza as your backup? Or do you maybe want to dip into the market and see what you can do to maybe just add a little bit of competition for Vukovic, if nothing else?
Edmund Al Young says, if Dan Hall can't get a start in this Central Coast Mariners team, he should move on. Yeah, it's interesting, kind of the rise of Caltech, but also some issues there. I'm going to give the Mariners...
It's a 50-50 with him and Nectar Triantis. They've been in and out all season. So, I don't think that there's really a permanent partner there right now. So, I don't think it's panic stations just yet.
A couple of comments coming in regarding replacing Kuol. Matt says Silvera should replace him, while Ryan makes point
that
playing
together on each flank. They were playing on both flanks when Kuol was still there. So, Silvera's been great, but I think that they can go Silvera and someone else. Why not aim big?
Yeah, it's interesting, Joey, talking about kind of the issues, the little kind of question marks you have around this Mariners team. They have had a lot of come from behind victories, and that on one level that suggests great, mentality, great ability to go through, the hard, go down 1-0 and manage the game well and get back into it. That's really important kind of skill to have, as we saw with Real Madrid in the Champions League last season. But at the same time, there are little concerns around that. But I think they're great. I think they're obviously the most likely team to challenge Melbourne City at the moment. And yeah, I'm going to give them 8.5 out of 10. And in terms of who should get mutual, I'm going to say... Oh, geez, it's a tough one. It's a very tough one. No mutuals for this one. You're doing well, unmutualified. Let us know in the
Instant
comments if
success.
there's anyone you get mutual with. Let's talk about Western Sydney Wanderers, who are sitting in third, just behind Central Coast Mariners. 5 wins, 3 draws, 3 losses, plus 4 goal difference. Not a lot of people, I think, start of the season would have said, yep, the Wanderers will be in the top 3 this season. They've kind of confounded expectations. One thing kind of to point out, though, they've only scored 12 goals. And if you think they scored 4 of those against MacArthur recently, that's not a lot of goals in this team. They've conceded 8, so another team kind of really built on that defense. And we know, Roods is kind of known for that, and he likes to solidify the defense and then kind of, once he's done that, kind of work on that. But, I mean, I've got to give him a 7.5 out of 10 because I didn't think that they'd be doing so well this season. They've got some very important victories. It feels like some of the fans are back on side. I think there's a lot of work to do, both on and off the field, to bring back the glory days of Western Sydney. But so far, so good, I think.
It feels sort of like this is like they're sort of like a mirror image of Melbourne Victory. Like, they're neither Western Sydney Wanderers or Melbourne Victory play exciting, attacking, visually appealing football, but the Wanderers are winning games. So the vibes are infinitely better. And I'm not surprised that they have been jagging results. I think I said in our season preview, and I said after the first few weeks, like, Marco Rudan can coach. Now, he's coaching in a very specific way, which, as I've said, isn't always very fun to watch, but he's identified a way to win football games in the A-League men and get points, and it's working for them. If anything, I think perhaps the Western Sydney Wanderers are perhaps better built to take on a team like a Melbourne City in a one-off grand final than the Mariners are, because I get the feeling that Western Sydney Wanderers would be able to drag a Melbourne City down to their level and then beat them with experience. I reckon they could do that to any team in this A-League's competition. So I'm not going to rate them as highly as I rate the Mariners, because once again, the resources involved at these sort of clubs, the expectations, the fan base, I expect the Wanderers to be a good team, but I'd be giving them a 7 right now based upon the fact that they are accomplishing what they are trying to do. Definite room for improvement. Like to see Rami Nazarene given more scope. Like to see Kseni Yengi given more scope. I think the Kurpic signing just has not worked out. But yeah, it's not going badly at Wonderland.
Debana, they play Melbourne City in the next game, and that's kind of got to be the big test for them to see where they're at. But how do you rate their season so far?
7 out of 10. I mean, it could be a lot better, though. I think against teams like Perth, for instance, they shouldn't be losing against them if they really have, aspirations to go, deep this season and get some silverware. No disrespect to Perth, but I mean, when you've got aspirations like that, you should be beating the bottom team. And even Marco Rudan said after the game, like, we just weren't good enough. And I think that the interesting thing that I've actually noticed in their trends, this team is very, very not reliant, but starting to sort of come to that area on someone like Kseni Yengi and Milos Ninkovic. Pre-Ninkovic injury, the team were performing a lot better going forward. And even when Yengi's been in the team, they've looked a lot better in transition, because you've got someone like Yengi who's just a ball of energy, whether he's playing on the wing or playing through the middle. He's someone who just goes at players, and he's just an unbelievable talent. And it's a shame that if he's injured again, robbed one from Wanderers supporters. It's disappointing to see him, on the sidelines, but also from an A-League's point of view, it's disappointing not to have one of your most exciting players on the sidelines. But I think that's sort of the big issue, is that even when they do have Yengi, they're still a bit hamstrung going forward. Like, because they're playing Yengi still out wide, but now they're starting Ngbakoto as their number 9, and Kurpic has been benched, but they're going with a winger as still their number 9. Like, I know Marco Rudan said they want to target a number 9 in January, and I think they really definitely need to, where sort of I'm going with all this. But I think there's still concerns about when they come up against teams that, they're going to put numbers behind the ball and sort of play their own way and really be sturdy defensively. And they say to the Wanderers, you have the ball and you try break us down to see how things would work out. Hello, Soot. But yeah, so I don't know. I think so far it's going well because they're winning. But they need to get themselves a striker in. And also, I think that's sort of the big thing for them. So we'll be curious to see how they go against Melbourne City, though. I think that's going to be a very interesting litmus test, considering it's also in Blacktown.
Yeah. Ryan's Rovers, Terry Antonis appears to be on the outer at Western Sydney Wanderers. A mutual would be beneficial for both sides, in my opinion. Hasn't been in the squad a single game this season. Yeah, I mean, look, Terry Antonis has had a very good A-League career. There was points where he's probably pushing for Socceroos selection. Would like to see him playing football. So, yes, I agree with that mutual. Any mutuals for you guys?
Sign a striker.
Yeah, you know what? Probably want to get rid of Kopich as well. All right. Let's go to the bottom of the table now. Perth Glory, who just beat the West Sydney Wanderers 1-0. I'm going to give Perth Glory a 4.5. It's almost a pass mark. I think I had very little expectations around Perth this season because of the whole the ground issue, the historical issues that they've had. Zadkovic is a very new kind of coach, an experienced coach. We hadn't seen much from him. And they haven't been doing great, but they've been doing better than I thought they would. And for that, I have to give them a little bit of credit. 3 wins, 1 draw, 6 losses. Basically the exact same record as Melbourne Victory. But I think they're doing it without the resources of Melbourne Victory. So, I think well done. You're bottom of the table, so you can't give them a pass. But I think there are some positive signs for Perth Glory, and I think Macedonia Park has proven to be better than expected. Debano.
Perth Glory winning it, like they haven't lost at Macedonia Park. So, I mean, they've got, I think, 7 of their next 8 games at home. Continue this trend, and it's actually looking all right for them. I think my only concern is the mixed messaging in regards to what Perth Glory are trying to achieve, because Zagovic has been very key on the rebuild side of things and sort of honing in that craft. Like, we are rebuilding. This is going to take time. But he's playing a lot of experienced players. Like, bar the Wanderers game, he brought in guys like Cameron Cook, and I think Joseph Ford started that game as well, and they brought Luke Bodnar back in. But, when you're doing that, but you're starting Liam Reddy and you're starting guys that are on that other side of 30, it's like, what is it that Perth are trying to achieve? So a lot of their signings were guys that were a lot more experienced, and not many of those younger players were really seeing minutes. Now, I know when Adam Taggart becomes available, you don't say no to Adam Taggart, especially if he says, I want to come play for Perth Glory. He could actually be a real game changer for them, because they do need a number 9 badly, like really badly. Adam Taggart already fits that for them. But there are some things that, I think just in terms of that messaging, it's gone a bit astray. But if they can keep getting points at home, there's no reason to suggest they can't fly up the table, because, they've made it a fortress. They've gotten 7 points out of a possible 9 so far. And it's just the only concern for them is, like, even if they sneak into the top 6, they're going to have to go on the road as well. So what's going to happen when they go on the road? Because you only play 13 games at home a season, but when you play those extra 13 games on the other side, that's going to be an issue. So for me, I give them probably a 5. Like, I think it's gone up recently, 5.5. Just because of that home form. At home, they've looked really good, but on the road, especially, they have shown a lot of signs for me that have still been like 1 step forward, 1 step back. I think this period now, this next month and a bit, will sort of define their season, where they go from there.
Joey, Matt's making the point. Their next, I'm just going to read out the next games. You tell me how many points you think they're going to get from them. They play Brisbane at home, Sydney at home, Victory at home, Wellington away, Jets at home. That's the next 5 games. How many points do you think they're getting from that? I think they're getting 10 points from that.
He's on mute.
I don't know. I can't hear you, but
2 or 5.
2 or 5 points from that.
2 or 5.
Yeah.
You think they're going to lose
Wow.
any games at home?
No,
You
sorry,
think they're
no,
going to lose?
3 or 5. Sorry, 3 or 5.
You think they're going to lose? Who do you think they're going to lose to? Sydney FC, Victory, Brisbane?
I think they'll
At
draw
home?
with Sydney and Victory. Sorry. They'll draw with Brisbane because all Brisbane does is draw. They will lose to Sydney FC. They will draw with Victory, and they'll either draw or beat the Jets.
Okay. Joey, a little less excited about that.
It's
Peter,
just my look at Perth. Like, they're better than they were last season. That is undeniable. But they had one of, if not they had one of the lowest bases of any team that still exists in the A-Liga coming into this season. Like, the teams that have been worse than them last season, by and large, don't exist. They're your Furies and your Knights and all that sort of stuff. So they're significantly better than they were last season, but we're talking about levels here. I'm watching Perth play. Yeah, I'm still yet to determine just where the project is going. Like, right now, they're better than they were last season, but I'm not convinced this is step one on a journey that is going to see them return to finals football and then have them start challenging for silverware, which should be the ostensible goal of every A-League men's side. You should be plotting with the time frame, depending upon where you currently are in your squad's life cycle, a pathway to silverware. And just right now, with like the veterans they're relying on and all of that sort of stuff, I'm not certain I'm seeing a pathway to a team that is going to be right up there in a few years' time. Like, I think they've raised their floor from very low levels. Not sure how high the ceiling is.
Peter says via Facebook, Perth Glory have been the biggest disappointment since the A-League began. And if you kind of take into their NSL history...
Yeah. And how successful they were in the NSL.
Yeah. Like, when I first started supporting football, Perth Glory was like the biggest team. Like, they were the most successful team. So, anyway, let's move on to...
Did we do their ratings and mutuals?
Yeah, I did mine.
Yeah, I think I gave them a 4.5.
Ratings, I'm going to give them 4.5.
All right, cool. And mutual, I think Daniel's made a good point. Kolakowski would benefit from mutual termination. We better utilize somewhere else. It'd be good to see him playing football. 2 games he's played this season. I know you guys don't like, as you say, ending the livelihoods of these players, but
my target
would want to agree to a mutual termination.
My target is whatever solution gets Kolakowski playing games.
There you go, a mutual termination. See,
in
you like
terms
this
of-
game, even though you don't.
Yeah. In terms of a target, you know what? Just keep playing the kids. Keep playing the kids. They've already signed their January target, Adam Taggart. I reckon they're fine. I reckon, for now, I think just keep playing the youngsters and give them an opportunity. Like, not to the level of last season, but, give guys like Cook, Ford, Muir, Colley, Jelacic, play them. There's talent there.
Let's talk about Wellington Phoenix. I think they're the 9th team we've talked about this evening. Wellington, they got the win, obviously, against Sydney FC on the weekend. It was their 3rd win of their season. They've drawn 5 and lost 3. 19 goals scored, 18 goals conceded. Sitting in 7th position, those wins have come against Sydney FC, MacArthur, and Adelaide.
I've got a good stat for you guys about Wellington.
Go on.
They have dropped 12 points from winning positions this season. A lot of late games where they've drawn games, and a lot of games they've actually lost when leading. And most of them, some of them have also been at home against teams like Adelaide, Melbourne City, Western United, the Mariners as well. They can beat anyone in this competition. I know that sounds like a big call, but I mean, they came here to Melbourne. They got a point off Melbourne City. They played Melbourne City this week. They probably should have gotten something from that game. They were very good against Melbourne City. I actually am very bullish about Wellington. If they start stringing results together, I reckon that they'll be that good that they'll be hosting a final this season. And I think they'll finish in the top 4. I am very bullish about where this team's going and what level they can get to when they're all on the park and playing at their best. I have a very good feeling about Wellington right now.
Ugarkovic going there seems to have actually been a good move, like for Wellington and for him as well, because he did seem like he stalled a little bit at the Jets and
At the Wanderers,
at the Wanderers, sorry. And it does feel like that's really improved them. I'm going to give them a 5.5, just because they're slightly above 9th.
Well, you were like anti-Wellington coming into the season.
It won't help your feud with Philip Rollo, Nick Stoll, but I too think they're going to play finals football. I think they're going to improve. The start of the season, it was clear that their foreigners were taking a while to find their feet. I think their foreigners are beginning to get a bit more settled and kick into gear. I think Tale is one of the better coaches in the A-Liga men's if they can hold on to him. I think home games, I think they do play finals football, and they might, to be honest, like this league's so mediocre and all these teams are so close that if you're in the mix for if you're in the mix for finals footballs, you're automatically in the mix to host one. Because, if you win a game versus draw one, all of a sudden you go from 6th to 3rd. So, they're also in the mix for a home final.
All right, let's talk about MacArthur. They're up in 4th, 11 games played, 5 wins, 2 losses, 4 draws. Also, we should point out they lifted the Australia Cup earlier in the season. I'm going to give them... Geez, it's a tough one. I'm going to give them 5.5 as well. I'm not massively impressed with MacArthur this season. I think it was a great, winning the Australia Cup was great. And they've got some players that I really, really like. Azani, the injuries to Davila and Da Silva were an issue. And I think once all those players are playing, they'll do better. But I'm not massively enthused by him. Debano?
I give MacArthur, for the fact they won the Australia Cup on top of their performances, a bit of an extra boost. I'm going to give them a 6.5. I think Ulysses Davila has had an unbelievable season. Today, he was brilliant to the point that Dwight York actually called him in his post-game press conference the best player in the competition. So that's quite a bold statement.
I mean, he's up there.
He's that far off.
He's
I think
that
Ulysses Davila could win the Johnny Warren this year. That's how well he's playing. And I think that they've answered some sort of areas on the field that they probably have lacked. I mean, I actually don't mind Arabuli as a number 9, because they really have just lacked someone since Matt Derbyshire, a bit of a focal point, and he's actually been okay for them. And he gets such good service. Like when you got Craig Noon whipping crosses into you, and Azani hasn't been starting recently, but when he's on the field, he put in a lovely ball in to sort of begin the play that led to Davila's goal today. Al Hassan Toure, I thought, had a good season. You mentioned the Silver as well. He gets a lot of service, and all you need is someone who's competent up front, and they're going to be able to bang in the goals when you got those guys crossing into you. And actually, to their credit, it's funny. I don't know if this is a bit of a false sort of stat to an extent, but they actually have the league high in clean sheets this season, 5, along with City and the Wanderers. They've just conceded. When they do concede, they concede in truckloads. It's just that it's like, it's one or the other when it comes to them at almost. And Philip Curto has low-key been the goalkeeper of the season. So
exactly. I think that's behind the clean sheets. Yeah. Like as a Philip Curto fantasy owner who gets points for every time he makes a save, I can tell you, especially at the start of the season, Curto was racking up the points because he was making an absolute ton of saves.
He did something a little bit silly, and he was very lucky that Mikkel Tadze.
But I benched him for Lawrence Thomas this week, so I was all right on that front. But it's what
quickly on that, they've conceded the most XG this season.
Yeah. That's what I was about to say. They've conceded 19.8 XG in this competition.
I got 21.3 according to this.
Which one are you looking at?
FOTMob.
I'm on FOTMob. Probably hasn't updated.
Updated from today.
F5. Oh, yeah, there you go. Now they're on 21.3. Oh, Jets in the mud. Now they're the second worst. Yeah, it was fun. Like we were talking at the start of the season, like what MacArthur were we going to get? Because in year one, Ante Milicic wanted the ball. In year two, Ante Milicic did not want the ball whatsoever. Well, we've certainly got our answer in the first weeks of the season. No team has had less of the ball so far this campaign than MacArthur. They are averaging just 42.9% of the ball this season. They're averaging 1.5% less than Brisbane Roar this season. So that tells you how Dwight Yorke is setting this team up. Like basically sit back, play on the contra, and just have your ballers ball out, so to speak. And well, I guess, yeah, they're fourth on the table. We've talked about you win a game, you're third, you lose a game, you're ninth in this current league. But if Dwight Yorke had been, if you'd taken a look at this team and said they'll be fourth after a third of the way through the season and they'll have won the Australia Cup, RBA would have dictated that it's a positive season for them. Once again, this is a team that I have serious concerns about regression to the mean, because you've got that XG conceded, which is so high. And are they eventually going to start coming towards more of that? A team's going to figure out that, as we've seen with Melbourne Victory this season, if you just give them the ball, bad things are going to happen for them. Does teams start moving towards more of a system like that? But right now, I'm going to give them a 6.5, leaning towards a 7 out of 10 on the RBA scale.
Hirado says MacArthur, the A-Liga's version of France, in not wanting the ball and hoping plain attacking talent swings it. Just on the attacking talent, start of the season, a lot of us were very excited about Daniel Arzani. He didn't make the World Cup squad. He has since, I think, the last 3 games come off the bench. I don't know if there's a reason for that in terms of injury. But do we feel like his form has slightly regressed? I thought when he came on today, he was very exciting. He just made the team look like have more of a spark now. Was that because the Jets had kind of taken their foot off the gas, had opened the game up? There was more space for him on the counter attack when they were going for it. But do you think there's an issue there with Arzani?
No, I just think that Noon and Toure were in better form, in all honesty. And he came on today and did brilliant. Arzani had a bit of a, like, being brutally honest, he had a bit of a patch where he wasn't playing well. So, I think that... Especially after missing out on that World Cup squad. Yeah, I think that maybe especially has been very underrated during this period. I think that I think he's just trying to work out what his best mix is right now. Now that Arabuli's back, it's moved Toure to playing more out wide, so I think that's changed things a little bit.
I also do want to point out, though, with Daniel Arzani, he's still leading the league in successful dribbles per 90. He's 0.5 better than next best Cassini Yengi. So he's still, doing the things that, made him so notable. He's willing to take on opposition players off a step and try to beat them. That's still there. And that's a really useful thing. That's a really useful thing to have as a player. But right now, he's obviously, Dwight Yorke has come out earlier in the season and criticized his defensive work. Perhaps, and especially if you are going to sit back and not have the ball for extended periods of time, maybe Dwight Yorke's decided that he wants players that are going to do more defensive work. Our view on the show about players and defensive work versus what they bring attacking is well established. The phrase "don't judge a fish about its ability to climb a tree" comes to mind, but we're not picking the team, so maybe that's a reason behind it. But I don't think Daniel Arzani is going amazingly, but I also don't think he's going terribly, and I think he's got the potential to start. If he starts again, I think he's got the potential to have great games like he had against Adelaide earlier in the season.
Interesting. Angelo says he's not international class. Come on, and then says prefer Lockie Rose. Azani seems to really divide people in Australia.
It's weird how
Azani and Lockie Rose are nothing alike, and Azani and Jed Drew are nothing alike as players.
But
like completely different roles.
I understand why people get really triggered about Azani. Like saying Azani is a good player. Like people get so riled up about it. Like when he was playing well at the start of the season, it was like, saying, it was like criticizing someone personally by saying Azani's playing well. It was like, nah, you're either one or the other. You're on one side or the other. It's like, can't we just enjoy a good player? Like as we said at the start of the year about enjoying tomatoes and enjoying good things, someone does something, it's like, oh no, you can't like Daniel Azani. It's a crime. No,
he does. He does seem to kind of have a larger amount of haters than the regular kind of A-League player, which I think is interesting because I think he's an amazing player. I really enjoy watching him play, but I wonder if we're not used to. There's very few players. You say he leads the league in dribbles per 90, Joey. We don't really produce a lot of dribblers, and I do wonder if maybe we're just not used to that type of player, and whether people view that type of player as, I don't know, being a luxury or being.
We all lost our minds about Qual when he was taking on players. We all get excited about Tilio to the same extent. Like, there's like the thing is, I just don't get it. Like with Azani, it seems like it's this real like one or the other. Like it's polar opposites. Yeah, you can't just enjoy him, you know. And if you do like him, it's weird. It's really strange. Like, and I feel for the kid. I feel for him, you know.
I do enjoy watching him play, but we'll have to see kind of what happens with MacArthur. So, final rating. I think I gave him a 5 out of 5. What did you guys say?
6.5.
6.5, leaning towards 7.
Oh, leaning towards 7. In terms of getting mutual, I'd like to see Jake Holman play more football.
He's playing more now. Started the last few games.
So, yeah, he came on today. I thought he did well, or did he start today? I don't know. He was playing at some point today, but I thought he did well. So, yeah, I'd like to see him more involved. Angelo is fighting back. Says Lockie, I know he's trying to say Lockie Rose, tracks back and more versatile, bud. You don't know squat, boy. It's getting pretty.
So if you want a player to perform a role, if you want a player that tracks back more, you play Lockie Rose in that role. If you want a player to dribble players and take them on off a step, you play Azani. Like, it's not a matter of my dad can beat up your dad, my favorite player can beat up your favorite player. Players have strengths and weaknesses, and you need to analyze that and take that into account when you're judging them, not just declare it's not just FIFA where one has a rating better than the other.
Lazar 11.
Yeah, go on, sorry.
Lazar 11 says people don't like how heavily pumped he was pre last World Cup. It's childish. Yeah, I mean, maybe it was because people thought their favorite player was going to miss out. Like, I always thought it was really interesting that people were so in the tank for Qual and then like, no way, Azani. And I was like, ¿por qué no los dos? But anyway, final team that we're going to finish with. Why have I missed the team?
Melbourne City after this.
Oh, yeah, we'll finish with them. Newcastle Jets. 4 wins, 0 draws, which is pretty incredible. 7 losses, 9 goals scored, 19 conceded, minus 10 goal difference. It's been bad. It has just been plain old bad for the Jets. Watched them today against MacArthur. They weren't great. I had high expectations for them this season. I think I said they'd finish 4th. I really saw a lot of promise with the Jets last season. And I really thought, despite, the changes in personnel, that they could build on that. And the simple matter of fact is that for the most part, they haven't. They've had a couple of moments where, they've had a good result away to Adelaide, for example, and a couple of other games where you go, okay, there's something there, including beating the Mariners 2-1. But overall, I think it's been a really disappointing performance from the Jets and from Arthur Papas. And I got to give them a 3.5.
It's like they haven't been playing well. They're obviously not the same side they were going forward last campaign. They've been conceding silly goals. Their defense still, their defense was an issue last season. It's an issue for them this season. I mean, you just look at their slightly more advanced stats. They're bottom of the league in expected goals this season with just 8.8. Their expected goals against is second worst in the competition with 19.7. So you can't even say that the stats are showing that they're actually better than what, their results and all that are saying. I think for me, it's sad in a way because this team was so entertaining last season. This team
They're not
was
even entertaining this season.
Yeah, they were doing something. They were doing something fun last season. I really enjoyed
they were
watching
creating
them playing.
chances. It felt like, if they could sort out their defense, that was what we said. If they could sort out their defense, they would be good this year.
And I got to be honest, I got to admit, there were times when I was watching the Jets and I didn't give a toss what they needed to do to get better. I was just enjoying what I was watching right then.
No.
And I think that's we talk on this show about, just how many of the league's problems could be solved with better football and more fun. The Jets reverting to the mean and not being fun anymore isn't a good thing. It's not something to celebrate. It's happened, and to try to claim otherwise is silly. And multiple things can be true at once. We can sing their praises last season and point out what's gone wrong this season. But I just think it's sad that it's happened to them because I was hoping I'd get more box office Jets. I enjoyed watching the box office Jets, and I don't get to watch that this season.
Debano, Geraldo says they are the A-Liga's version of Belgium. Would you agree with that statement? And what's your thoughts?
Well, they're not as high NRI as Belgium.
Belgium's the ultimate NRI team.
You know what though? They have got some NRI players. Piscopo, O'Neill,
Bart Smelly,
No.
Are you trying to claim, Nick Stoll, that Brendan O'Neill is the Kevin De Bruyne of the A-Liga men's?
I just mean Brendan O'Neill was a central midfielder on a multiple Premiership Championship winning team. I know that was a few years ago now, and that's post an injury.
That suited him.
Well, sure. But we thought that Papas was capable of building a good system, partially because he worked under Anne. She's obviously very good at building a good system. And, we thought Piscopo was at a point pushing for Socceroos selection. He'd done very well with the Olyroos. And we thought that he could kind of make that next step up. And it hasn't been great.
Just a couple points. First of all.
Yeah.
I agree with the whole thing that this Jets team is nowhere near as fun as they were last year. The one thing that still irked, I can't help it, just can't get out of the back of my head, is this team is still performing with a massive handbrake on them for what they can do from a business standpoint, because they're not owned by them. They don't have their own owners. They are dealing in a situation different to any other club in this competition. Last season, in my view, they still outdid expectations. They were fun last year. This year, it strayed from that. Some of the signings that they did actually bring in were a little bit questionable to the way that they actually want to play and the way that they were trying to play last year. I mean, you mentioned about Piscopo. I still think he's got a lot of talent, but I mean, he's not the Daniel Pena replacement. Like, I know we probably thought so maybe at the start of the year, but it's been shown he's not Daniel Pena's quality. Daniel Pena was an outlier. He's an unbelievable player, full stop. And I think they'd love to still have him at his disposal. I mean, Mikkel Tadze's production this season's dropped off as well as a result this year. They had guys like Olivier Bermal, who I thought was also a very good player for them last year as well. But defensively, they've got issues. Going forward, they've got issues. I don't think it's exclusively an Arthur Pappas problem. I think there's a lot more that goes to it. I don't think it's, as simple as just saying, yeah, Pappas is at fault here. I think, there's still some things the Jets have got to sort out from a backroom point of view. And hopefully that can get sorted out soon, get some owners in, and, then we can judge them after that. But I do understand the frustration of the fans that they continue to, put in these performances and they're not playing well. But at the same time, like, this is a hamstrung club. Like, every time I try and analyze the Jets, it just keeps coming back to this club is hamstrung, So
yeah,
for
but
me to give
are they really more hamstrung than Brisbane Roar? Are they really more hamstrung than the Central Coast Mariners?
Yeah, because they've got their own ownership.
Jesus,
I know that
Perth Glory, like,
still.
Like, I genuinely like the operating budget. Yeah. I don't know how much different it would be.
Look, I think, I still get that. And I understand the Jets' performance. It doesn't, put away from the stuff they're doing on the field when you're analyzing it from an X's and O's point of view. It has not been good enough this season. So for me, look, personally, to give them a rating for this year, I would say probably a 3 out of 10. It's been a bit disappointing.
A-Liga says the box office has been burnt down. Peter via Facebook says Jets worst team in the league, rating -1. I love a big call. We've had our first minus of the evening.
Minus.
Lazar11 says Pappas ain't it, unfortunately. Cameron, every week I get to retweet Pappas had you all fooled. Matt says RIP Pappas Ball and the box office Jets 2021 to 2023.
I gotta say, people love a nice little victory lap on us because we call them the box office Jets last year, don't they?
Well, fine, whatever. I mean, enjoy. You know what? If you're having fun having a victory lap, I think you should enjoy that.
As long as you're enjoying your tomatoes as well and you're having a good time, brilliant.
But just on Pappas, I mean, we really, I guess, more out of hope than anything, we were really hoping that he could be, one of Ange's disciples and be very similar to him. But do we still think he's of, a really high level? If someone could mute their phone, that would be very much appreciated.
Actually, my laptop. Sorry, guys. The iMessage. It's the iMessage, guys. Sorry.
If only you could mute that.
Just all these notifications.
I'll go on to that.
What do you guys think of how Pappas has handled this?
I mean, has he done something notable? Isn't he kind of like doing just the coaching routine of we got to be better, we weren't good enough, we were doing X and Y? I don't think he's come out and blown up and thrown anyone under the bus or anything.
No, I don't think so either.
Do you think, I guess maybe last season we were thinking of him going on to bigger and better things. Do you think he's still going to go on to bigger and better things?
Mate, it's been 10 games.
Yeah, it's been a season and 10 games, actually, because he was there last season.
All right. They weren't even that bad last year. Like, I'd like to see him in a club where he's actually got more resources. I know that it might not come because they might look at his results-based analysis, but he's a good enough coach.
Yeah. I'm not going to profess to be intimately aware of how recruitment works at the Newcastle Jets, especially in relation to the fact that they don't have any owners. How do they get things ticked off and all of that sort of stuff, given that it's not their money that they're spending. But I'm not sure how much role Pappas has in the recruitment, or what factors he's taking into account, or whoever is leading the recruitment is taking into account. But it's fair to say that recruitment this offseason hasn't worked. So maybe that's a question for Pappas or whoever's in charge of the Jets to answer as well, because it's not an unfair accusation to label that some of these players coming in have both altered the style that the Jets are playing, arguably for the worse, and then they're just not performing as players were last season.
Matthew Pappas says, get him to Sydney FC. With their squad, he will do well. P.S. I'm not related to him, which is a great shout from Matthew. Yeah, look, I'm not saying that Pappas is finished or whatever.
Oh, no, that's completely ridiculous to say he's finished.
No, I just think there were high hopes on him. And this season, what you were looking for was signs of improvement. And we haven't got that. In fact, we've got regression. And I think
which is, like I said, which is sad because I like watching entertaining teams, and his side was entertaining last season. Football is still supposed to be an entertainment product at the end of the day.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about Melbourne City, top of the table. Will anyone catch them? 8 wins, 1 draw, 1 loss. Probably would have had 9 wins if that game against Victory had continued because they were 1-0 up in that. 23 goals scored, 7 goals conceded. I mean, just steamrolling the comp. Yeah. I got to give them a 8.5 out of 10. I mean, they've been really, really good. Yeah, City, I mean...
It's expectations, Nick. It's the expectations. This is what they're supposed to do.
Mate, I'll give them a 10.
You give them a 10? They are the perfect team.
No, 9.5.
You would never, let me tell you, Tabana, you'd never get a job at L'Equipe with the player ratings, all right? You give them a 10 already, a 9.5. A 9.5 is too generous. 9.5.
Are we gonna discuss L'Equipe's rating of Graham Arnold then?
Forget L'Equipe.
Good evening, gentlemen. They blew their shot. They blew their shot at a perfect season. If they go 26 games or 27 games, for argument's sake, let's say 20 wins, 5 draws, 1 loss. How the hell did they lose to Sydney FC? Like, we actually could have seen our first Invincibles. If there was going to be a year to do it, it was this year. And they blew it by losing to Sydney. So I give them a 9 because really they should be on a 10.
Yeah. I'm going to give them an 8.5, maybe. The thing for me is you sort of have to judge City, A, based upon what they're doing in the league, and B, those expectations that they've set for themselves, both in what they say and their previous performances. And still looking at this Melbourne City side, I just don't, when I look at this Melbourne City side, and this was the exact same case for me last campaign, I don't see the same sort of all-conquering, dominant force that would arrive at games during the 2020-2021 campaign. If you remember during that campaign, there were periods where they'd just rock up and you weren't touching them. Or they'd just flick a switch and for 15, 20, 25 minutes, they'd score 3 or 4 goals and bang, you couldn't do anything except just watch them go past you.
Joey, based on what you've said so far on this pod tonight, I don't think you think anyone is a force. Maybe it's just that word that has got your goat.
Possibly. In the great tradition of Jonathan Howcroft hating the word coup, maybe I hate the word force. But yeah, so I'm not going to give them a 10 because I've seen other City sides that if I was an opposition team, I would fear more than I fear this Melbourne City side right now. Maybe that's got to do with the fact that this Melbourne City side has had some injuries and plays in and out of the lineup as well. They haven't really had Curtis Good's been in and out of the lineup, or he's been battling injuries. Nuno Reyes in and out of the lineup. Florent Bernier hasn't even really played yet. He came off the bench, and then he just got his first minutes last night in their win over Western United, but which maybe that was a sign of them being able to flick that switch and overrun teams, what they did in the opening 25 minutes against Western United. The thing I want to watch from Melbourne City over the next little while is what sort of adjustments are we going to continue to see from this side under Rado Vidicic? I think Rado Vidicic sees out the season. I don't think they bring in another. I think he sees out the season as interim caretaker, whatever you want to call it. One of the things he said last night really struck me. He was talking about how since he's come in and taken over, he's given the players a bit more freedom. They're not as regimented in their roles as they were under PK, and that there's still an adjustment period associated with that. They're still, when they're moving forward, basically, is when they're being given freedom, and they're still trying to figure out what they do with less automation in what they're doing. And I think that's actually going to be really fascinating to watch moving forward, because everybody's talked about their attacking talent: Lecky, Naboot, Tilio, McLaren, Florent Bernier when he comes back, Van der Ven, Valon Berisha. I'm really going to be interested to see what they do when still working within the confines of that Melbourne City system and the expectations Melbourne City has for their players, but what they do seemingly under a coach that is going to allow them to, for lack of a better word, cook a bit more. Are they better as a result? Do they get worse as a result of that? Because was it the CFG, the famous CFG system, bringing those results? I think that's going to be really interesting. So, like Teo, you talk about like, why did they lose to Sydney FC? Maybe it was just under Rado. Rado's got different expectations. They weren't used to it. They slipped on a banana peel. But maybe this team has the potential to become a really even more creative and dominant force with a bit more freedom, or maybe it all falls apart. I'm just really interested to see what happens.
Can I play devil's advocate again? But just quickly about the.
It's because he's got the evil mustache. It's like the evil Nick DeBarno. He's constantly the devil's advocate.
Yes, essentially, I am Lucifer. So basically,
no, you're Jamie McLaren.
Well, speaking from experience of being inside the four walls. No, but like to be fair about that Sydney FC game, one thing to remember, it was their first game after the World Cup. They had a lot of players that did play that game who came back from Qatar. If memory serves correct, I think all of them played that game. McLaren definitely played. Lecky played. It was a weird game. It was a weird round. Like everything that happened.
Do we remember who was best on ground that game?
Max Burgess was best on ground in that game. So, it was a good day for Max Burgess.
Can't stop greatness.
But to be fair, I think in comparison to the championship winning team, individually, when you compare this team to that team, this team is better. And they are deeper as well than that team as well. You look at the upgrades in bringing guys like Valon Berisha in. Richard Van der Ven, I think, has been a brilliant signing for them. Marco Tilio has gone through the roof. Matthew Lecky's been in some brilliant form. Geordie Boss has been sensational. I watch that guy every week, and he gets better every week. Like it's unbelievable watching him play. He's one of the best attacking fullbacks I've seen this league have in such a long time. Callum Talbot's been great for them defensively with Lam and Good. They're good down there as well. Aidan O'Neill's had a good season. And you mentioned just casually bringing back Florent Bernier, who was their best player last season, Joey. Like, you just get him back in January, this team is only going to get better. And, you got Andrew Naboot still on the bench and a bunch of other players. For me, it's looking quite likely. It's just a matter of who plays Melbourne City in the grand final this season. It'll be curious to see, what happens as the year goes on. I think there will be a slip up. I think that it's going to be more than just one loss. It always happens. It's so hard to go the whole year, as an invincible or just with one loss. There will be a slip up along the way. But yeah, it's going to be a really intriguing sort of watch to see who ends up playing them in that grand final. But for me, I'm going to retract on the 10. I think the 10 was probably getting a bit too excited. I'm going to go the 9. 9 out of 10. And I think for them to target, I think it would be trying to find out what your best midfield mix is now that Berengay's back. Does Berengay take Richard Van der Ven's spot? Does Berengay now become a player off the bench? Because I think Valon Berisha is a lock. And just working out what the best mix is. But you know what? It's a great problem to have if you're Rado Vidicic.
Speaking of Rado Vidicic, Angelo is calling him Rado Guardiola, which I quite like as a nickname. Matthew Pappas says, seeing Talbot and Tilio do well, just another reason to sack Corica. How can you let that talent go? I don't know if it's all up to Corica, those type of things. And then Hiraldo says, be right back. Just going to spend the next year pondering what Tilio could have done at the World Cup. Mate, we made the second round.
Played,
all right.
I wish he played.
Yeah, but
I wish he played.
What do you think? We're going to beat Argentina because Tilio would have played?
All right, there, man. It would have been fun. Like, come on, like giving him an opportunity for 20 minutes. I reckon just get him out there.
Yeah, don't forget, we could have won the group by losing by Leicester, France.
Yeah, look, I'll say
which is why I'm a little I wanted to see Tommy Deng play, but
All right, you guys, look, we had an amazing World Cup. We have to enjoy the fact that we had an amazing World Cup. We massively overperformed. All right, let's not get hung up over the fact that some of our little favorite players didn't play enough. All right, that World Cup was insane. All right, we just got to enjoy
Devlin didn't get a game.
Geraldo, Cordo's serious question: would Berenguer have done better than Griezmann in the World Cup final?
Probably.
I mean, yeah, it's hard to do worse. But
Benny and Cololo probably would have done a better job than Griezmann in the grand final as well. The World Cup final as well.
Geraldo points out that Tilio scored against Argentina, including McAllister at the Olympics. Well, who knows? Maybe that's the reason to be Arnie out, because he should have made the quarterfinals. He should have brought in Tilio. He should have pubbed Argentina.
Denny Jeanrai had a great game against Argentina in the Olympics, and he didn't even get to go to the World Cup. So,
all right. So amazingly, we've managed to
against Egypt as well. They should have brought him if he was fit and played him up front.
We've managed to turn the greatest ever World Cup performance, at least result anyway, into a we should have played this guy chat. So that's TNC for another day. Is there anything else that you guys want to bring up? I imagine we need to touch on the A-Liga belt. So do you guys want to give an update on where it's at?
Okay, so the reigning holder of the A-Liga men's belt is Jordi Boss. He won the belt off Brian Kaltak, and he has retained it ever since. And the reigning holder of the A-Liga women's belt, after winning it in round one and not losing since, is Western United defender Alana Chern, or Cern, as the commentators keep calling her. But A-Liga women's belt on the line on midweek as Western United welcomes Sydney FC to town. So massive test of our title belt holder's reign as she gets set to welcome Sydney FC to town, which should be a lot of fun, I think.
So who's the number one contender? Is it Sarah Hunter or is it Madison Haley?
Well, as Teo was talking about on Dub Zone this week, every time TJ Vladic has played against Courtney Vine in the past two regular season games, Courtney Vine's induced a red card. So maybe a red card inducing performance will be enough to get Vine time, belt time.
Yeah, I mean, Western only have to draw for CERN to retain. So let's not go crazy. I don't have, obviously this pod's gone 3 hours. So rather than talk about A-League Women's, here's what I will say. Tune into FNR and listen to Radio Dub on Thursday with Pakua Frimpong. Some good guests are lined up there. And it's after the Wednesday midweek games too. So it'll be quick turnaround on that. Try the Ladies League. That's where you can hear Taryn Hedo. She actually turned us down this week. I said roughly 8:15 p.m. For those of you listening on delay, it is now 9:40 p.m. I thought we were only going to spend 90 minutes on the early stuff. So I have a 9
Have you
second
listened to this show before?
I have a 9-second message from Taryn to play for you. This is going back to the Christmas Eve show here with Lockie Flanagan's message. 1 second.
Hello, TNC friends and family. My contribution to the podcast tonight, Forza NPL Victoria. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.
Yeah, don't need to add more than that. So, yeah, give the Ladies League a listen. Massive dub podcast. And, yeah, there we go. That's women's football on TNC this week at the 2 hour and 52-minute mark. If you made it until now expecting gold, I'm afraid I've got some bad news.
Bad news.
I liked Perth Glory's game against Melbourne Victory on the weekend.
Should have won. They were the better team.
Yeah, they were the better team. I think I've rated the job that Alex Parkes is doing there, and I hope they're able to kick on in the second half of the season and make the race for finals football more interesting, because I get the feeling Adelaide's going to fall away and Perth Glory are going to replace them in that race for finals football.
2 points.
I have one. Go, Nick.
I was going to say, thoughts with Riley Baisden. Hope that for good news after what happened on Friday night. 2, Teo, I know this will trigger you, but Sarah Rowe, nice little Ronaldo chop, good showing as a Collingwood supporter. Forza.
All right, so we have one person say Forza NPL Victoria. We have another person say Mark the NPL Victoria.
Hey, I like the
Let's sign Irish players that haven't played organised games of soccer since 2015. You've wound me up, you Nick. All right, let's leave A-League Women's there. I just want to mention one thing. After Joe Gauci copped 4 goals yesterday, Mr. Joseph Donnelly Lynch saw fit to quote tweet the results graphic and shout me out saying, everyone who has Joe Gauci as their fantasy keeper in the mud. Well, Mr. Lynch, I look at the final score in our head-to-head league this week, and I see my team on 90 points and your Chiefs of Staff on 83. So thank you for a good contest. And Ulysses Davila, 18 points, last score that came in on Sunday. Thank you very much. Viva la Mexico!
Have I won a game of A-League Fantasy yet?
No, you're bottom of the league.
Zero points.
To be fair, you got pretty close to me, Stoll, in a week where I squeaked over the line, but you went. You only scored 31 points this week, so you're not going too great.
I can't even remember my lineup. I got to even see if I have a pass.
Max Birch is captain. By the way, Phil Rollo is sitting second, so he's going to need to lose a few games here if he wants to end up in 9th.
Should we run through the entire league's results real quick?
Yeah,
no, real quick.
So getting the win.
55 minutes.
I didn't yet.
Yeah, neither have I, but I've got ticker, and we've already gone 3 minutes. What's another 10 minutes?
Worked all day today, Joe.
No. No one cares.
No one, honestly, absolutely no one cares. So,
can we run through the entire results? You know what? Do you remember how I used to do it on the BBC where they'd be like, League 2, Rochdale 1, Southend 0. We should do it like that.
Skull, how do you even, if that's your British accent, how do you even have a job in this industry?
Yeah, sorry, I just I absolutely shut
Dude, you didn't rip out is that a luxury take there, Stoll?
It's a luxury accent. Hey, sorry this pod went so long. Straight apologies. Thanks and success. Anyone want to get in any final comments before I say goodbye?
No.
Call it off. Ring the
Thank
bell.
you so much.
Ring the bell.
Tune in next week where our show will be a more respectable, probably hour and a half, hopefully. Thank you so much.